Isabella Conti had one chance. Keep running. Do not look back. If the men from the black cars caught her, it was over. She was already breathless, racing along the cliff path. The Mediterranean roared below. Wind tore at her dress. Behind her, the shouting came closer with every step. The cliff dropped straight into the sea. Then her sandal slipped. Her hand flew out for something to hold. Her fingers found nothing. No stone, no path, only air. For one terrible second, Isabella was falling, the water rushing up to meet her, and at that moment, a hand caught her wrist. The force of it tore a cry from her throat. She was hauled back from the edge and slammed against a man's chest. His arm locked around her waist, hard, nowhere to move. Only the heat of his body against hers, dark navy eyes fixed on her. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, as if he'd caught something that belonged to him. He leaned in close to her ear, his voice low against the wind. Do you always run toward death? Or am I the first man to make you this desperate? Isabella looked down at the rocks below, then back into his cold, mocking gaze. And for one breathless moment she didn't know which was worse, falling to her death or falling into his hands. But half an hour earlier, Isabella Conti's life had still looked ordinary. The call, that changed everything, came while Isabella Conti's car was climbing the cliff road toward her father's mansion. Malta Island slid past the window in flashes of sun and stone, olive trees bent by the wind, honey-colored walls, the sea burning blue far below. For a few seconds, it almost looked like the summers she remembered. Then the Conti mansion rose ahead behind its high stone gates, and the old weight settled back into her chest. Once, this house had meant breakfast figs, salt air, and her mother's laughter moving through open rooms. Now it meant only that Vito Conti had summoned her. Anita Vella drove with one hand on the wheel. 32, Maltese, keeper of the estate on the island, and for 5 summers the only person who had ever made those walls feel less empty. The car speakers cracked, and Vito's voice tore through the line, shredded by the roar of helicopter blades. Anita! Do not go to the mansion! Isabella's hand closed around Anita's arm, and the calm drained out of the car. Vito was shouting now, forcing the words through the noise. We've been hit! Eros Sorvino and his men are inside the house. I'm in the air. I'm crossing to Sicily. Anita hit the brakes. 600 meters ahead, where the gates should have meant safety, 6 black vehicles blocked the road. Her father's voice broke under the static. They cannot reach Isabella. Do you understand me? Get to the boat at the marina. It will take you to Sicily. Anita, can you hear? The line died. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Anita threw the wheel hard and the car came around in a shriek of rubber, the cliff wheeling past the windshield until the road behind them swung into view. Isabella twisted in her seat. Back at the gates, the black cars were already moving, breaking after them one by one. They've seen us! Her own voice came out thin and fast. Anita, they're coming! Anita put her foot down. The engine screamed and the road blurred. Then the car lurched, a violent jolt that threw Isabella against the door. Damn it! Anita's knuckles whitened on the wheel. The tire! We've lost a tire! The car pulled sideways under her hands, fighting her, dragging toward the edge. Isabella! Anita kept her eyes on the road. Give me the Conti ring. Now! Isabella understood before she wanted to. No, Anita, we are not doing this. They can't take you. Anita wrestled the car straight. Your father kept you hidden for years. These men have never seen your face. They don't know you. Behind them the cars came on, churning the dust into a brown wall. Anita's grip flexed on the wheel. If they catch us... She didn't finish it. When she spoke again, her voice had dropped into something steadier and far more frightening. Listen to me. I'm Isabella. You're Anita. Do you understand? Isabella shook her head hard. No, I won't put you in danger. I'm the one they want. Anita cut her off. They won't know the difference. And they won't hurt me, not right away. The real fear surfaced then, and it had a name. It's your father I'm afraid of. If he learns I couldn't protect you, he'll do worse to me than these men ever could. The car was flying, the drop a hand's width from the wheels. The second I stop, we run. If we get split up—" Anita's eyes cut to her. "The rock's at the hidden cove. You hide there." Isabella's hands moved on instinct, snapping open the glove box, digging through it. "Is there a gun? Anita, is there anything?" The cars filled the mirror. Anita stamped the brake, and the car slewed to a stop with the cliff edge barely inches from the wheels. "We don't do anything that gets you killed, nothing." She held out her hand. "The ring, and your bag. Give me your bag." Isabella looked down at the Conti crest on her finger. That small band of gold carried everything she had spent her life trying to escape, and it was the one thing she had never been allowed to take off. She worked it loose and pressed it into Anita's palm. Two of the cars broke free of the dust, almost on them now. "Run, Isabella!" Anita was already shouldering her door open, grabbing the bags to throw them over the cliff. "I'll get rid of these. Go. Now. Run." Isabella ran. The yellow linen of her dress snapped around her legs. Her hair tore loose across her face. She went down the cliff path toward the sea and made herself look back once. Two cars had stopped at the top of the slope. Men were already spilling out, spreading across the hillside, eating up the distance she'd thought she had. A voice came down the wind behind her, calm, worse than shouting. "Nobody runs. I want both of them." She didn't slow. The path narrowed under her sandals. Stone slid loose. The drop on her right yawned wider. Wider. Then the path was gone. Just gone. Fallen away into open air. She couldn't stop. Her legs kept going. The edge rushed up. She threw her weight back. Too late. Her foot came down on nothing. Air. Only air. The sea swung up to meet her, the rocks bright and waiting far below. This was it. She was falling. And then it happened. Fingers closed around her wrist. Iron. They locked, snapped tight, and tore her back from the edge in one brutal pull, the sky and the sea wheeling as the ground slammed back under her. She hit him chest first, hard enough to empty her lungs, both hands splaying flat against him to stop the fall. For a few seconds she couldn't see anything at all. She could only feel him, the heat coming off him through his shirt, the smell of him closing over her, leather and oud, and the dark trace of tobacco underneath. Above the open collar, her eyes caught the bare line of his throat. The skin there burned bronze by a lifetime of this sun. Slowly, because her body had stopped taking orders from her, she lifted her gaze the rest of the way. Sharp navy blue eyes were already on her, fixed and unhurried, close enough now that she could see the dark ring around the blue. He didn't look away. At the corner of his mouth a small smile was sitting, the faint, unbothered kind that said he had all the time in the world and she had none. Then she felt it, his breath, warm and slow across her lips, close enough that another inch would have closed the space between them. She had stopped breathing entirely. And when he spoke, the voice that came with it was the deepest she had ever heard, low and dark and threaded with mockery, settling somewhere under her skin before she could stop it. That was a foolish way to die. His words broke whatever had frozen her. She shoved back against his chest, twisting for an inch of space, and his hand only closed harder around her wrist, holding her exactly where she stood. "There's nowhere left to run." Something shifted in his expression, too controlled to be a smile, too amused to be anything else. "It's either the cliff—" She looked. Past the broken lip of the path there was only the long drop, the rocks, the sea throwing itself white against the foot of them. "Or me." His arm came around her waist and pulled her hard against him, pinning her to the heat of his body while the broken edge waited behind her heel. She felt every inch of where they touched, felt the steadiness of him against her own racing pulse, and hated that some part of her had stopped fighting. He held her there a moment longer than she could explain. Then his arm fell away. His hand caught her wrist again, and he turned up the slope, pulling her after him. He went up the narrow path ahead of her, her wrist locked in his fist, dragging her after him fast enough that her sandals kept slipping on the loose stone. She pulled against his grip and got nowhere. "Who are you?" The words came out sharp, breathless. "Stop dragging me." He didn't slow, didn't turn. "The man who just saved your life." The answer came low and unbothered, like it cost him nothing. "You're welcome." She had no choice but to follow, half a step behind him, close enough to see what she didn't want to see. The broad set of his shoulders blocking out the sun, dark hair lifting in the wind off the sea, and the hand wrapped around her wrist, large, sun-browned, the hand of a man who'd done violence. And yet the nails clean, the grip controlled, almost careful where it held her. She hated that she'd noticed. She looked away. By the time the ground leveled out at the top, her sandals were half torn from her feet, and her arm ached to the shoulder where his grip had never once loosened. The cars came into view ahead. He didn't slow until they reached them. The second car was already pulling away, climbing toward the Conti estate behind a wall of dust. A man waited beside the car that had stayed, hands folded in front of him. "Mr. Sorvino." His eyes moved to Isabella, asking a question. "We sent Miss Conti up to the estate." "Mr. Sorvino?" Isabella's breath came faster. So this was Eros Sorvino, the Mafia boss. The man whose name her father had screamed through the helicopter noise. The man who still hadn't let go of her wrist. His thumb stayed against the bones of her wrist, light and deliberate, while his eyes moved over her face. When he spoke, the words came slow and edged with mockery. "So the woman I came for is in that car, on her way to the estate." His gaze sharpened on her. "Which makes you... who, exactly?" Her heart slammed hard enough that she thought he could feel it through her pulse, but she lifted her chin. Shrinking had never been in her. "Anita." The name came out steady. "Miss Conti's assistant." Her eyes cut to the dust trail of the car already gone. Whether they'd hurt Anita was the only question in her head, and she couldn't ask it. Eros caught her chin on one finger and turned her face back to his own. An assistant. He studied her like a thing he hadn't decided about. Too pretty for a housekeeper. Too proud for an assistant. The man by the car spoke up. "Boss, Vito Conti's helicopter touched down in Sicily. Our people there have eyes on him." The corner of Eros's mouth lifted. "Good. He runs. He pays for it either way," he murmured, his eyes never leaving her. He took her by the arm and walked her to the open car door. "Get in." A short, furious laugh escaped her. "Why are you taking me? I'm no use to you." He pressed a hand to the back of her head and folded her down into the seat, his gaze still on her face. "You know the house. You'll serve in it. You'll serve for me." When he slid in beside her, the whole air inside changed. His height, the weight of him, that scent that was only his. It filled the space until there was no part of it she could breathe that wasn't him. The car pulled out toward the estate where she'd grown up. The driver glanced at the mirror. "Boss, does it make sense for us to stay here?" Eros was looking out the window. His answer came hard and low, with no room in it for argument. "We stay until I find another place on this island." He kept his gaze on the road, the hard line of his jaw catching the passing light. Vito Conti took something that wasn't his. Now he'll learn what it feels like. Beside her, the quiet grew heavier, pressing on her skin. Then he looked over at her, slow enough to make her pulse trip. "The house is mine. The daughter is mine." His gaze dropped to the wrist he still hadn't fully released, then came back to her face, cold and dangerously calm. "Even the maid." Isabella kept her eyes on the window. Ahead, the other car carried her name up to the house where she'd grown up, a place that had never once felt like freedom. The ring had left her hand minutes ago, the name only moments after. Strange how little fear came with it. A woman with nothing left to lose was a harder thing to hold than either of them knew yet. The car rolled to a stop at the main gates of the Conti estate. Isabella searched the grounds out of habit, the gatehouse, the long drive, the terrace where her father's men always stood, not one familiar face. Her father's guards were gone, every last one of them, and in their place moved men she had never seen, carrying themselves like the place already belonged to them. Eros stepped out and took his time with the mansion, a man measuring something he had already decided to keep. He spoke to the driver climbing out beside him. "Put the girl in one of the rooms, Tony." His attention came back to her through the open door. "I'll get her story later." He walked toward the mansion the way he had moved everywhere since the cliff, certain in no hurry, as if nothing here could touch him. Tony reached in and hauled her out by the arm. "Out you come!" She wrenched against his grip. "Get your hands off me! Don't touch me!" Eros stopped. He didn't turn right away, and when he did, there was nothing quick about it. "Leave her to me, Tony." She gave him the full weight of her glare. His fingers closed around her wrist again, the same hold as if he had never quite finished the one from the cliff, and he started toward the house, drawing her along with him. "Come, show me the place." The edge of a smile sat at his mouth. "Since you're the help around here, let go of my arm." She kept her feet under her and refused to be towed. "I'm not running anywhere." "No?" He looked almost entertained. "Given where I caught you, running clearly isn't your strong suit." His eyes moved over her, slow and thorough, reading more than she wanted read. "Tell me, what exactly is your work in this house?" She made herself swallow the first answer that rose. "I see that the staff do their jobs and the place runs the way it should." He let that stand and walked her on. The corridor opened ahead of them, and that was when she saw the wall. Bullet holes, a torn line of them across the old stonework, pale wounds in stone that had stood 300 years. Her temper rose before her sense could catch it, and she turned on him. "Was there a fight in here?" The words came out sharp. "Is anyone hurt?" She stopped walking. He stopped with her, her wrist still caught in his hand. The two of them turned face to face in the narrow light. "Who do you think you are?" Her spine stayed straight, every inch of it. "You bring guns into a house where people live." Something moved behind his eyes when she said the word hurt. There and gone, a crack closing over before she could name it. Then his face was stone again, and he angled his head, studying her the way a man studies a thing that won't quite add up. "For a maid, your tongue runs long." Her eyes cut upward, sharp with everything she couldn't say. "I am not a maid." A smile touched the corner of Eros Sorvino's mouth. His gaze went to the door beside them. He drew her to it, opened it, and put her inside. He raised one finger. "Be a good girl while I'm gone. I'm not finished with you." The door shut in her face. The lock turned with a heavy, solid clunk that said it would not open again, and the heat rushed up her throat before she could think. She hit the wood with the heel of her hand. "Where is Miss Conti? Take me to her." Her palm cracked against it again, harder. "Do you hear me?" The footsteps on the other side thinned to nothing. She pressed her forehead to the door and made herself breathe, the anger settling into something colder and far more useful. He thought a lock would hold her. He had no idea where he'd put her. When she turned, the room caught her by the chest. She knew this smell. Old paper and beeswax, the particular gold of the sea light through these windows, her father's library, the last room in the world where she'd been a child instead of a Conti. She had learned every corner of it before she was tall enough to reach its high shelves, and the man who'd locked her in didn't know a single one of them. The fear went out of her like a tide pulling back. What rose in its place was almost a smile. She crossed to the far bookcase, the floor finding her feet from memory, and reached for the fourth shelf, the blue spine, third from the end, the one she'd pulled 100 times as a girl, just to watch the wall move. Her fingers closed on it. She drew it back. Deep inside the wall, something gave. A click, then the slow grind of old stone, and the case swung inward, letting out a draft of cold air. The passage opened in front of her, black and narrow, and hers. The way through the house her father had never known she'd found. Somewhere behind these walls, Anita was wearing her name, sitting in the hands of his men. So she wasn't running. She was going in after her. Isabella stepped into the dark and looked back once at the locked door, and for the first time since the cliff, the ground felt like her own. A sly smile crossed her face. She said it low, almost to herself. "Catch me if you can, Eros Sorvino." The bookcase swung shut behind her on its own weight, and the dark swallowed her whole. Cold air. Old dust. The library gone, sealed off on the other side of the wall. Her hand found what she wanted on the ledge by the entrance, a battery torch, left here years ago because everything useful in this house had a hidden twin. She thumbed it on. A thin beam cut the black. She knew these tunnels. She had mapped them as a girl, every turn and dead end, the narrow stairs that climbed between the walls of rooms her father believed were private. She moved up through them now, quick and quiet, one hand trailing the cold stone until voices reached her through it. She stopped and listened, her ear close to the hidden seam in the wall. She thumbed the torch off, swallowing the beam, and let the dark close around her. Then she found the loose block at shoulder height, worked it free a finger's width, and through the gap came a line of lamplight and the room beyond. Anita sat in the middle of it. Eros stood over her, 2 fingers under her jaw, tipping her face up to his. "Your father took something from me that can't be bought back." No heat in his voice, that made it worse. "The money was only the part I could count." His grip stayed on her chin, holding her face to his. "Now I have you." He studied her, slow and unblinking. "So tell me, how far will he go to get his daughter back?" Anita didn't flinch under his hand. "My father isn't as fond of me as you think. I'm not worth much to him." "No?" Something in his attention sharpened. "Then why keep you like a ghost? No face, no age, nothing on record that says where Isabella Conti even lives?" He released her chin and stepped back, looking at her the way a man looks at numbers that won't add up. "I expected someone younger. How old are you?" Free of his hold, she raised her chin herself and looked straight at him. "You've got so many questions about his family. Ask him." One of his men came in behind him. "Boss, there's nothing on her. No phone, no bag, no papers." Eros went still. His eyes stayed on Anita, and something turned behind them, slow and certain, like a key going halfway in a lock. "Tony." He didn't look away from her. "Bring me the maid." On the other side of the wall, Isabella's hand flew to her mouth. Then she ran. She jammed the torch back on, and its beam jerked across the walls. Turn. Stairs. Another turn. Her breath tore loud in the narrow dark, her heart slamming high in her throat, and her mind kept running faster than her feet. Tony was already moving. She was 3 walls and a staircase from a locked room she was supposed to be sitting inside, and she wasn't going to make it. She reached the library wall a moment too late. Through the thin seam where the bookcase met the wall, she heard the lock turn, the door of the room she was supposed to be locked inside. And then Tony's boots crossing an empty floor. "Where is she?" A second of nothing, then his voice climbing the stairs. "Boss, the girl's not in the room." Footsteps came down hard and fast. She knew that stride. Eros crossed into the library on the other side of the wall, and his voice carried straight through it. "The door was locked." Quieter now, which was worse. How does a woman walk through a locked door? Find her. Now. She had seconds. Going back led straight into them. She turned and ran the other way, deeper, her breath ragged in the black, until the tunnel gave out at a low steel door. A keypad glowed faintly beside it. Her fingers were shaking. She steadied them and keyed in the code. The lock released with a soft click that, down here, landed like a gunshot. She slipped through, pulled the door shut, and felt the tunnel seal itself back into the wall behind her. No one could find out this passage existed. Light hit her face. She was in the back garden now, chest heaving, the sun too bright after the dark. For a heartbeat, she only stood there, thinking it through. The gate was watched. She would never clear it. And even if she could, Anita was still inside, still wearing her name. She wasn't leaving without her, so she wouldn't run at all. Isabella crossed the lawn to the chairs by the pool and sat down as if she had every right to the chair, to the garden, to the whole house. Inside, her heart was throwing itself at her ribs. She made her hands lie still in her lap, and her face give nothing back. A man on the far path caught sight of her and stopped short. "Mr. Sorvino!" His shout carried over the water. "She's here!" Then she heard the terrace doors and the footsteps, and she didn't turn around. Eros Sorvino was coming across the grass behind her, slow, in no hurry at all, and she could feel each step land somewhere under her skin. The pulse in her throat climbed. Her hands stayed folded. He came around the chair and stopped in front of her, close enough to block the sun, and still she kept her breathing even and her chin where it was. Only then did she lift her eyes to him, calm as the water beside them. He looked down at her for a long moment, and the longer he looked, the less amused he seemed. "How did you get out of that room?" She held his eyes, a slow smile curving her mouth, and gave him the answer light and sweet, like it was nothing at all. "Hocus pocus." He ran his tongue slowly along the inside of his cheek, watching her. For one dangerous second something almost broke through his control, then his eyes cut to Tony. "Move my things into the master suite." Tony glanced at her. "And the maid?" Eris's gaze came back to her and stayed there. "The maid stays with me." He took her by the upper arm and pulled her up the stairs, his grip closing hard above her elbow. "Let go of me!" Isabella matched his pace so he'd have no excuse to drag her. "I can walk without you holding on. Every time I let go of you, you throw yourself off a cliff or vanish through a wall." He didn't slow. "Easier to keep you where I can see you and reach you." That was when she saw it. Blood. A thin line of it trailed down from somewhere high on his arm, dried at the edges, a faint smear of it left on her own skin where he held her. Her breath snagged. The thought came before she could stop it. Had he done something to Anita? Eros brought her into the big suite on the top floor, and this time, when the door shut, he turned the lock with himself on the inside of it. She backed up against the wall. She was watching him now, every nerve pulled tight, and she could feel her own heartbeat in her ears. What was this man going to do? He read the question on her face, and something in it almost amused him. He took his time about it, shrugging out of his jacket, working the shirt buttons loose one by one while he spoke, and she found she couldn't look away. "What's this? A minute ago you were leaping off cliffs and walking through locked doors." His attention never left her. "Now you've decided to be afraid of me?" She didn't answer, because the shirt came open and the reply died in her throat. He was built like something carved, broad through the shoulders, the muscle of his stomach hard and burned bronze by a lifetime of this sun. And high on his arm, raw against all that gold, ran the torn line of a bullet graze. A graze. Shallow, half-dried, the kind that bled slow and seeped for hours. And he'd been hauling Isabella up staircases the whole time, like a man who'd done nothing harder than pour himself a drink. Her eyes went from the torn skin back to his face. If Mr. Conti did that, good for him. His jaw shifted, and when he answered, there was no anger in it, only contempt. "Your Mr. Conti did nothing. He was halfway to the helicopter while his men did the shooting. One of them got lucky on his way out the door." His gaze held hers, steady. "Vito Conti runs. It's the one thing he's good at." He stepped into the bathroom, ran his arm under the tap, and pushed through a cabinet, looking for something. She made herself breathe, then watched him fumble at it a moment longer. Isabella couldn't keep it in. "You need antiseptic on that." He came back to the doorway and looked at her. "Now you're worried about my health." "Maid." Her smile came out sharp and without warmth. "I'm not a maid. I told you. I run this house." Eros lowered himself into the chair beside the bed and tipped his head back, watching her. "Then come here and patch me up." She held his eyes, her face lifted, and refused to move for a few long seconds. She crossed to the bathroom, dug a med kit out of one of the low drawers, and came back with it in her hands. She tipped her head toward the mattress, her voice clipped. "On the bed." One corner of his mouth tipped up, slow and sure of itself. "I'll give you this. I like a woman who knows what she wants." She gave the kit a small shake. "If you'd rather keep that arm, watch how you talk to me." He pushed up out of the chair and crossed to the bed, heavy and slow, and stretched out across it. "Remind me never to hire you." He settled back against the pillows. "You've got far too much mouth." She came toward him with the kit, and the room felt suddenly very small. Eros lay back against the pillows where he'd settled, his bared arm resting toward her. Isabella perched on the corner of the bed, close enough to reach him, and tore open the antiseptic and a strip of gauze. She took his arm in her hand and bent to look at the graze. "It grazed me. His voice came easy, like the torn skin on his arm bored him. That's all. She pressed the soaked cloth down onto it, hard. His brow lifted. He made no sound. She kept the pressure on, harder than the wound called for. You walk into a house with 5 staff and 6 armed men in it. What did you think this was, some movie? You don't think Vito Conti makes you pay for it? He turned his head toward her, and the small space left between them closed to almost nothing. This near, she could see his eyes weren't only blue. They were dark, nearly navy, and they didn't move off her face. She could smell him now, warm skin and leather, and she caught her lower lip between her teeth before she could stop herself. His attention dropped to the bitten lip, then climbed back to her eyes. That mouth doesn't match the rest of you. His voice stayed low. All that innocent face, and no manners under it at all. She didn't look away. And the man I work for is better, is he? His attention sharpened on her, the amusement gone out of it. The man you work for is a thief and a killer. She pressed the cloth down again, slower this time, and held his eyes while she did it. And you're something better than that? Eros's hand shot up and caught her by the wrist, the one holding the cloth to him, the one touching his skin, and held it there against him. He drew her face down toward his. If I were the same kind of monster, that man's daughter wouldn't be breathing in a room upstairs right now, and you'd be at the bottom of that cliff. He let her go so suddenly, her hand snapped back to her chest. She started to rise. His hand came down on her thigh and pressed her back down, firm, leaving no room to argue. "We're not finished talking, maid." She turned on him every bit of anger she had. He smiled. Anita, that was the name. His thumb stayed where it was on her leg. "And before we're done, you're going to tell me how you walked out of a locked room." His voice dropped. "But first, start with Isabella Conti." Her throat moved as she swallowed. His eyes narrowed. "And choose your lies carefully, Anita." Isabella's eyes dropped to the hand still resting on her thigh. She let them stay there, 1 second, then another, until Eros felt the weight of the look and drew his hand back. "Tell me about Isabella Conti." He settled deeper into the pillows, his attention fixed on her. "How long have you known her? How long you've worked in this house? I want all of it." She bent over his arm and started winding the bandage, slow and even. "All of it about me or about her?" His eyes narrowed and a small smile touched his mouth. "Both." So she gave it to him. The truth, dressed as someone else's. Isabella Conti was never fond of her father. She was keeping her voice level, her hands moving steadily over the cloth. Her mother died years ago. She was raised abroad, schooled abroad. She lives in London. She only comes to this island in the summers. For a moment the words pressed against something in her chest. She was handing him her own life and calling it another woman's. The dead mother, the empty summers, the years of being sent away. It should have felt like armor. It didn't. It felt like being seen through a keyhole, one piece at a time. She pushed the feeling down and kept her hands moving. Her father must care for her, though. Eros stayed with her face, not the bandage. In New York, no one even knows the man has a daughter. The word caught somewhere under her ribs. Care. She tied off the turn she'd just wound and didn't let it reach her face. She looked up and let the look say more than the answer would. "Hardly anyone knows Vito Conti has a house on Malta either." She drew the bandage tight, tighter than the wound required. He shifted with a low sound in his throat, but he didn't tell her to stop. "Vito Conti loves 2 things, money and power." She smoothed the edge down, half surprised at how level her own voice stayed over her own life. Keeping his daughter out of sight was never about protecting her. It was about never giving anyone a way to make him weak. "For a maid," he murmured, watching her hands. "You know a great deal." "I told you. I'm not a maid." "Then explain it to me." His gaze moved over her, slow and unconvinced. "Why would a man like Vito Conti hand the run of his house to a girl as young as you?" One corner of her mouth curved without warmth. "I'm 25. She pulled the knot tight and tied it off. His jaw flexed, but he held the sound back this time. Their eyes held.
and I'm very good at my work." A knock landed on the door. "Boss?" Eros didn't look away from her. "What is it, Tony?" "Miss Conti is asking for the maid." Isabella's hand stilled on the bandage. Eros caught it. The small stop, the half-second her fingers forgot what they were doing, and something behind his eyes sharpened, filed it away. He rose from the bed, slow, and the smile he turned on her had a question in it. "Then let's go see how well Anita serves her mistress." The door opened, and Eros walked her in with Tony a step behind. Anita was on her feet before the door had finished swinging. The two women crossed the room and held on to each other, and for a second, Isabella let herself breathe in the only friend she'd had inside these walls. "They didn't hurt you?" Anita pulled back just far enough to search her face. "Tell me they didn't." "I'm fine." Isabella tightened her arms, and under her breath against Anita's ear, the words came fast and low. "There are tunnels below the house. We can get out through—" A hand closed over her arm and drew her back. Eros set her an arm's length from Anita, his attention moving between the two of them. 3 hours apart, and all this longing. His voice stayed even. "That's enough." He took the phone from his jacket and held it out to Anita. "Call your father." Anita didn't take it. "I don't have his number memorized." His eyes narrowed on her. What kind of daughter doesn't know her own father's number? He dialed it himself, watching her the whole time, and pressed the phone into her hand. "Vito Conti is going to hear his daughter's voice and know I have her." The line rang twice. Then it connected. "Papa." Anita kept her eyes down. "It's me. They caught us. Both of us. Together." For 3 seconds, the line gave back nothing. "Are you all right, Isabella?" Vito's voice came through, careful, too even. "Did they hurt you?" "Anita's with me. It's just the two of us, Papa." Isabella's gaze cut to her, every nerve drawn tight. Her father had heard Anita's voice answer to his daughter's name, the woman who'd run his house for years, and he hadn't missed a step. He knew, and he was playing along. And not once did he ask for her. Eros took the phone back and held it between them, the line still open for the room to hear. "I have your only daughter, Vito." The words came low and even, with no heat at all. "Come back to Malta. Bring back what you stole, and come alone." Vito's voice came back through the speaker, fast and tight. "Give me time, Eros. I can't pull that kind of money together by tonight." The muscle in Eros's jaw ticked once. "Time." A cold thread of amusement ran under the word. "Claudio didn't get time." Isabella watched him. The name cut across his face as it left him, and for the first time she wasn't looking at a monster. She was looking at a man standing over a grave. "You took Claudio from me." His voice dropped into something quieter and far worse. "So I'm going to take your daughter from you." The reply came back loud enough that Isabella caught the shape of it, a promise to kill him if he laid a hand on her. Eros almost smiled. "You should have thought of that before you crossed me. There's nowhere on this earth you can run that I won't find you." The line went quiet. Then Vito's voice again, lower, bargaining. What it would take, what Eros wanted for her. "Bring back what you stole, and I'll let her live." Eros's eyes drifted from Anita to the woman he thought was the maid, then back. "But understand me. The money keeps her alive. It doesn't buy her back. She stays mine either way." A sound came through the speaker, a question, an objection. 3 days, Vito." He let the silence do the work before he finished it. "On the 4th morning, your daughter stops being a Conti." Even through the speaker, Vito's voice broke for the first time, asking what that was supposed to mean. Eros ended the call. He turned to Anita, and his gaze went down to the gold ring on her finger, the Conti crest, catching the lamplight. "Where are your papers?" Anita didn't step back, but the color had left her face. "What do you want with them?" He closed the distance and brought his face down to hers. "Vito took my blood from me." His attention flicked just once to the ring. "I'm going to take his name." He turned for the door. "Find her papers, Tony,
And keep her door locked. Tony's brows drew together, but he knew better than to ask. Eros answered the unspoken question anyway. I'm marrying Isabella Conti. He closed a hand around Isabella's arm, the one he still believed was the maid, and pulled her toward the door with him. Then he stopped and looked back at Anita, at the woman he thought he was marrying. And she becomes mine. On the stairs, Isabella pulled against the hand wrapped around her arm. I'm sick of being dragged everywhere by the arm. Eros let go. Behave, and I'll keep my hands off you. But you're stubborn, and you don't take orders. His attention slid sideways to her. And I need to be sure you won't pull another vanishing act. They stopped outside the library. He opened the door and stood there, waiting, while she held her place on the threshold and refused to walk in on her own. Inside, you're going to show me your magic. She drew in a slow breath and met his eyes. There's no magic. I went out the window. The corner of his mouth lifted, the kind of smile that called her a liar without a single word. Oh, is that so? His hand settled at the small of her back and steered her through the doorway. Show me. 20 rooms in this house, and the woman who runs it knows every secret in the walls. I'm certain of that. Her own smile came out thin and angry. He pressed her forward with an open palm until she stood in the middle of the room, then crossed to the wall across from her, set his shoulders against it, and folded his arms. Show me. She let her eyes drift to the window instead. Outside, the light was going, the sky bruising toward dark over the water. When she turned back to him, she didn't answer the order. She asked her own question. You said Vito took someone from you. Who was he? Eros raised a brow, and a short laugh moved through him. So, now we change the subject. No, she held her ground. I'd like to know who I'm working for. That's all. He pushed off the wall and started a slow circuit of the room, talking as he went. Claudio was my cousin. We grew up together. He ran a hand along the window latches, checking each one without seeming to think about it. When Vito hit the docks and took my shipment, he killed him for it. He drifted toward the shelves, his eyes moving over the spines. It was a job we were supposed to run together, the three of us, out of New York. Then he stole from his own partner. His fingers trailed across the row of books. Isabella pressed her tongue hard to the roof of her mouth and held still, while her pulse climbed and counted off every spine his fingers passed. Not the blue book. Anything but the blue book. That shelf was the only way out she had left. If you do business with a man like that, she got out, then you're no better than he is. His shoe came down flat and he stopped, listening to the sound of it against the floor. I was born into this work. We don't always live inside the law. He lifted his head and looked at her. But I don't steal, Anita. And I don't lie to people. The words landed somewhere they shouldn't have. She was standing in front of him, built entirely out of a lie, and he had no idea. He was coming toward her now, slow, heavy, taking his time about it, and she made herself hold her ground while every step closed the air between them. He stopped close enough that she had to tip her head back to keep his eyes. One finger lifted a loose strand of hair off her face, slow, like he had all the time in the world to do it. And the backs of his fingers grazed her cheek on the way. This close, the dark navy of his eyes wasn't cold the way she'd told herself it was. It reached somewhere under her skin and stayed there, and she couldn't make herself look away from it. You have an honest face. His voice had dropped, gone almost soft. Defiant, proud, and hiding something. She swallowed. He caught her hand and turned it over, studying it. And these are well kept. He lifted it higher, folded it into his own palm, and moved his thumb in a slow circle over the center. Light, in no hurry at all. She felt it everywhere it had no business reaching and hated that her body answered before she could stop it. Then he pulled her fast across the room and set her in front of the shelves. He stepped behind her and laid both hands on her shoulders. Show me the trick. He leaned down until his mouth was at her ear. You interest me, Anita. The words brushed warm against her skin. Don't ruin that by lying to me. Isabella stood in front of the blue book, breathing slow, her hand not quite lifting to it yet. He was going to find it. Not now, maybe. Not this second, but he would. The man behind her was sharper than she'd given him credit for, and a locked room he couldn't explain would gnaw at him until he tore every shelf apart. And if Eros Sorvino was going to discover her only way out, then she would rather be the one who chose the moment. Better to hand him a secret and buy his trust with it than have him take it and trust her less. Her hand rose toward the spine. She steadied herself and let it go. Eros leaned in behind her. The words brushed the side of her neck, low enough to feel like a touch. "Good girl." The book slid forward. Deep in the stone, the house answered. A low grind of weight shifting behind the wall, and a seam of black opened where there had been none. Eros looked into the opening, and the corner of his mouth moved. "Of course he did." He gave the darkness a small nod. "Ladies first." She stepped into the passage. He came in close behind her, the cold of the tunnel rising around them both. A few steps in, he moved past her to take the lead. His back turned. Now, she spun and lunged for the closing gap, throwing her whole weight at it, one breath from sealing him in, and gone. An arm shot around her waist and ripped her back. They hit the wall together, hard. He pinned her there with his body, and in the last of the failing light, their faces were close enough to share the same air. "What did you think would happen, Anita?" His voice came low, almost amused, near enough that she felt the shape of the words. "Were you really going to lock me in my enemy's walls?" His thumb dragged slow across her cheekbone. Not soft, nothing kind in it. Something that warned and wanted in the same motion. "You do have a talent for bad ideas." She held still under the touch and refused to look away, and that only seemed to please him. He brought his mouth to her ear. "There it is, that little mind of yours." The wall ground shut behind them. The dark dropped over everything, total, and took the room with it. She couldn't see him now. She could only feel him, the warmth of his breath moving across her face, the leather and smoke of him filling the narrow space. His arms still locked around her, holding her there, like he had no intention of letting go. "Let me go," she got out. His hands opened. He stepped back, and she lost him to the pitch black. "You don't give up easy." His voice circled her, close then closer. "I'll give you that." She lifted her chin to a face she couldn't even see. "I wouldn't know unless I tried." A low laugh moved through the black. She heard him crouch, feel along the floor, and then a click, and a torch threw weak yellow light up between them. Eros turned the beam down the passage and took in the cut stone, the old iron brackets, the long throat of the tunnel running under the house. His lip curled. Vito Conti built a palace and hid like a rat inside it. He swung the beam back to her. "Now show me the way out." Isabella moved ahead of him. At the mouth of the tunnel she stopped and turned, and for a moment neither of them moved. His eyes already on her, hers steady on him. Eros tilted his head just slightly, and his eyes narrowed, like he could feel what was coming. The corner of her lips curved, and the words came teasing, almost playful. "Find it yourself." And she bolted down the tunnel. Eros stood where she'd left him, the torch cutting across the edge of his smile as the dark swallowed the sound of her footsteps. He let the words go after her, into the empty tunnel. "Careful, Anita. I'm starting to like you more than I should." Isabella ran. The tunnel stretched on under the whole house, branching, climbing, a stone maze built to lose a man. She kept to the line she knew and ran for the corridor where the light should be. She found it, the light panel on the wall. She hit the switch. Nothing. "Damn it!" The word came out of her in the dark, useless. Far back down the tunnel, a beam of light swung across the stone, and his voice came with it. "Anita." Calm, closer than she wanted. "If my men find you first, I won't be close enough to stop them from treating you like a threat." The plan was dead. She knew that now. Knowing these tunnels was one thing. Finding her way through them blind was another. She turned toward where the exit had to be and ran. Her foot caught. The floor dropped away. She was falling through the black, hands flying out, grabbing for anything. Nothing. Only air. Stone slammed up into her forehead, white, and a ringing that swallowed everything. The dark spun, and for a moment she didn't know which way was up, only the cold of the floor against her cheek and a high whine in her ears. Pain tore through her skull.
She shoved up onto her hands. The beam was closing in, and that was when she felt it. A deep throb above her brow. Something warm sliding down her face. She pushed the panic down and told herself what mattered. Find the exit. Be fast. Reach it before he reached her. She got to her feet and went on, one hand on the wall, fast as the blind passage would let her. The exit door rose up out of the black in front of her. The glow still hung behind her. He was following. Back in the dark, Eros closed his eyes a moment and let a smile cross his face. Seeing her was no use to him down here, and he had no need of it. Her scent gave her away. White flowers, jasmine, the faint warmth of musk under it, the same one that had been in his head since the first second he'd pulled her against him on that cliff. He spoke low into the dark, half to himself, half to her. You run, and you leave it behind you the whole way, stubborn girl. He opened his eyes and followed it through the black. Isabella's fingers found the keypad. She couldn't see a single number on it. She felt for them in the dark, counting by touch, working the code she'd known for years. She pressed the first. The beam swung up the passage. Anita! She kept her fingers steady and pressed the second. Eros held the torch ahead of him. She turned her head, and his eyes locked onto her. He broke into a run. She went for the next ones, fumbling through them, but the blood was running into her eyes now, hot and stinging, dragging at her focus. A single thought beat through her. Not now. Please, not now. 10 feet. In the thin spill of light, she hit the 5th. Her finger was reaching for the last when his arm clamped around her waist and tore her backward. The pull threw her aim off. Her hand came down on the wrong key, and she knew it the instant it landed. A red light began to flash overhead, on and off, and a short alarm cut through the tunnel. Then a heavy bolt drove home inside the door. They both went still, staring around them. "Oh, no, no!" Isabella pressed a hand to her head. Eros looked at the keypad, then at her. What happened? "I hit the wrong key." The words scraped out of her. "The tunnel's locked." His jaw set. For how long? The truth of it settled over her before she said it, and her voice came out barely there. 12 hours! Eros turned the torch on her. "So you've locked us both in here. 12 hours. He raised the beam on her and stared, like he couldn't believe what she'd done. The look lit the anger in her. "I wouldn't have hit the wrong key if you hadn't dragged me off it. And you wouldn't have been at that door at all if you hadn't run from me." The words came out rough, but his face didn't match them. "Still trying to lock me in, Anita?" He pulled the phone from his back pocket, checked it, found no signal this far under the stone. Then he crossed to the sealed exit and drove his fist against it, twice. "Tony!" His shout went up the passage and died there, swallowed before it could carry. No boots, no answer, only the weight of all that rock between them and anyone who might hear. A faint smile touched Isabella's mouth. She held his eyes, her voice almost gentle. "Down here, you can hear them. They can't hear you." He stepped in and took her face in one hand, tipping it up. "Look at me." The torch rose and his eyes found the blood above her brow. "You're bleeding." She held still under his fingers. "I fell. We need to clean this." His thumb skimmed the skin beside the cut, slow, like he didn't want to hurt her. And there it was. For a single second, something soft moved through his eyes. She had braced for anger, for punishment, for the cold, familiar shape of her father's disappointment. None of it came. He was holding her chin like the wound mattered to him, and her whole body didn't know what to do with that. "Stubborn girl." He let her go and swept the light down the tunnel. "You're going to make surviving you a full-time job." His gaze moved over the dark. "Is there a medkit down here? Anywhere to sit out 12 hours? She stared at him. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't grabbed her, hadn't made her pay for it. She caught herself nodding like a child who'd been caught at something and let off easy. "Second turn on the left." Eros brought the torch back to the keypad. "What's the code, Anita?" Isabella looked at the floor and gave him nothing. "Come on." His tone had picked up a dry edge of humor. "I've seen the tunnel. We're stuck down here together. Knowing the code can't cost you much now, especially after the spot you've just put us in." Isabella folded her arms and turned her face away from him. 2, 1, 0, 6, 0, 1.
He tried the keys. Nothing moved. The pad had locked with the door. He swung the light back down the passage toward the second turn. Then we go find somewhere to wait it out. He started walking, and the words dropped lower as she fell into step. And if you run from me again, Anita, I'll punish you for it. They moved together down the passage, his torch throwing their shadows long against the stone. Eros kept his eyes ahead, but the words were aimed at her. You know these tunnels well. Better than well. That shouldn't surprise you. She matched his pace, careful to sound bored by it. I told you. I run the house. He angled the beam toward her as they walked, watching her face in the swing of it. Men like Vito don't give staff the bones of the house. She swallowed before she could stop herself. The questions were circling closer to ground she couldn't afford, and she kept her voice level. Mr. Conti trusts me. And why is that? He kept his tone soft, with something underneath it. When she didn't answer, he let the silence stretch a few steps, then tried another way in. So what are you to him? Servant? Favorite? Lover? Her head snapped toward him, and everything in her recoiled at once. What? No. God, no. The denial came out too fast, too disgusted to be anything but true, and the corner of his mouth lifted at it, like he'd gotten the answer he wanted. Then his gaze dropped to the floor, to the dark drops trailing after them across the stone. Anita, stop. She came to a halt and glanced back at him over her shoulder. He raised the light to her face again, and whatever he saw there made his jaw tighten. That needs stitches. Her cheek, her jaw, the front of her dress had all gone dark with it. He set the torch down at his feet and started working the buttons of his shirt. She realized where this was going and edged back a half step. What are you doing? If you don't put pressure on that, you'll lose enough blood to go weak on me. His fingers moved down the last of them, and we've still got 12 hours to get through. Eros pulled the shirt off, folded it in his hands, and pressed it to her forehead. Hold this. In the low light, she found herself looking at the bare skin gone gold in the beam, at the bandage she'd wrapped a few hours ago still riding his side. He was leaning in over her, holding the cloth to her brow, close enough now that she could feel the heat coming off him. She caught herself breathing him in, leather, smoke, something warmer underneath. And the second Isabella felt herself doing it, one thought cut clean through her. Not him. Anyone but him. She turned her face away. She cut him a dry look from under the folded shirt at her brow. Trying not to catch something off it? Her hand came up to hold it in place, and a slow smile pulled at his mouth. 3 hours in, and we're already patching each other up. Funny how that worked out. He drew back to look at her. How much farther? She lifted a finger past his shoulder. We turn left up there. His gaze moved over the maze of stone around them, and then came back to her, slower this time. You know this place too well for someone passing through it. How many years did you say you've worked here? The question landed exactly where he'd aimed it, and she felt the trap in it before the last word was out. He picked up the torch and started walking again, leaving her to follow. Isabella stayed a step behind him, choosing the safe answer. I didn't say. No. His voice carried back to her, easy, unhurried. But we've got 12 hours down here, Anita. We'll have plenty to talk about. The torch only half lit the room until Isabella reached past the doorway and pressed the switch on the wall. Light flooded the low stone vault. A bed against one wall, a steel counter and sink, a mini fridge, shelves stacked with water and cans, a first aid cabinet with its green cross. Eros took it in slowly. So, this is where Vito hides. His gaze moved over the shelves, the locked cabinets, the heavy door at the far end. Paranoid, but practical. Setting the torch on the counter, he opened the little fridge and pulled out a bottle of water. He drank half of it, then looked at her over the rim with something dry in his eyes. Please tell me you didn't think far enough ahead to poison the water. She gave him a smile with nothing behind it, pressed the bloody shirt back into his hand, and walked to the small washroom. The mirror told the truth. A thin split above her brow, dried blood tracked down one cheek, dark across her jaw. She caught the angle of him in the glass. Eros moving through the place, opening drawers, taking inventory of what wasn't his, and her eyes went hard. Then her eyes came back to her own face. Brilliant. You did this to yourself. The words came under her breath, meant for no one. She bent over the sink and washed her face, and the cold water dragging across the cut pulled a wince out of her. When she lifted her head, he was there in the glass, right behind her, a medkit held in one fist. It's not as bad as it looks. His gaze dropped to the cut. But we're cleaning it up. I've got it. She turned and reached for the kit. Eros looked at her open hand, then at her face, and the corner of his mouth moved. Instead of giving it over, he closed his fingers around hers and led her out of the washroom to the edge of the mattress. Sit. It made no sense, the way that single word landed in her, low and warm, and she hated that some part of her wanted to obey it before she'd even decided to. She sank down where he'd put her. He sat down facing her, opened the kit, and went to work. Cotton, antiseptic, a careful pass across her brow. Might leave a small scar. A faint smirk crossed his face. Something to remember the night by? You think this is funny? Her jaw tightened under his touch. I'm only in this mess because of you. He held her eyes, and when he spoke it was without any heat at all. Have I hurt you once since the moment we met, Anita? You came into my home with a gun. You scared the staff out of the door. For all I know, you put bullets in a few of Mr. Conti's men. Her voice climbed. That's just savagery. His hand went still against her forehead. Your home? The question caught her, and she had to swallow before she could cover it. I live here too. He went back to cleaning the wound, slower now. When this is over, I'd like to see your room. What do you want with my room? She pulled back an inch. Was that concern, or are you flirting? I thought you were marrying Miss Conti. He shook his head slowly, like she amused him. You really are a handful, aren't you? His thumb steadied her chin. I'm marrying Isabella. That doesn't mean I've decided what to do with her maid. She caught his wrist and pushed his hand away from her face. That's enough. I'm fine. She got up and paced the small floor, anger driving every step. And if your men hurt Isabella, no one moves without my word. He stretched out on the bed, set his back against the pillow, watching her wear a path across the stone. They're loyal. They wait. She kept pacing up and back, too wound to stop. Enough! His voice followed her. Come sit down. She shot him a look. You've already taken the bed, I see. He rose, unhurried, every line of him caught in the low light. The bare chest, the cut shoulders, the bandage riding his side. I can be a savage, just not with women. She tried not to look and looked anyway. He stood there too still, too at home in his own skin, and that made looking away harder than it should have been. She dropped onto the edge of the bed, keeping her eyes off him. Are you planning to walk around like that all night? He picked the ruined shirt up off the mattress and turned it over, white cotton gone red across every inch. Looks that way, Anita. One corner of his mouth tipped up. I'll do my best not to distract you too much. At the fridge, he checked the dates on the protein bars, then tossed them back with a quiet disgust. The crackers had gone stale in their wrappers. The vacuum-packed meal had swollen and turned. Vito hides from his enemies in a stone bunker and can't keep food alive for one night. Then he saw the wine. 4 bottles on the floor. A low breath left him, almost amused. Vito, old friend. He lifted one by the neck. No whiskey. His eyes came back to her. We'll suffer through Vito's taste then. Isabella lay back against the pillow and watched him work the cork, watched him fill a plastic cup he'd dug out of a drawer. You know. He held the cup without passing it to her, turning it slow in the light. One bad night tells you more than 10 good years. Eros turned the cup in his hand and a small smile caught at one corner of his mouth. So you're curious about me, Anita? Yes. She kept her eyes on him. Who are you, really? Are you as dirty as you look? Were you always like this? He ran his tongue across his teeth and shook his head. Clean isn't a word men like me get to use. His jaw shifted. But Vito Conti doesn't get dirty himself. He sends other people into the dirt for him.
Isabella watched him closely, her teeth working at her lower lip. She'd always known her father bent the law, but dirty was something past breaking a few rules, and she wasn't sure she was ready to hear how far past. He brought his gaze up to her. Trade, that's what I do. Smuggling sometimes, but never the kind that hurts people. He set the cup down on his knee. The kind men pretend they're too clean to need. She leaned back against the wall. Smuggling what? I'm not handing you my books, maid. Something dry moved through his voice. But it's a family business. His focus drifted for a second to something past her. I move goods, Anita. I move money. I move power. I don't move children. I don't touch women who don't choose this life. I don't sell a partner and call it strategy. The last line came out rougher than the rest, and she caught it. The small drop in his voice. The way the words snagged on something he didn't name. He covered it fast. Vito did. She didn't know what sat under those two words, but she felt the weight of them, and she changed direction before he could see her looking too hard. You threaten to marry a woman you don't know. She tilted her head at him. Have you ever made a vow you actually meant? He showed his teeth when he smiled. So I do get under your skin, Anita. Then the smile settled. This isn't a vow. It's a move. He tipped the last of his cup back and looked at her. Now it's your turn. Where did you grow up? Here. Her fingers tightened around the cup. In Malta. The quiet stretched until he filled it. And? She drank down what was left. My father worked the marina for Conti. He kept his attention on her. And that bought you the house? She met the question without blinking. It bought me a place in it. For a moment he studied her. You could have chosen a different life. Why stay here? Are you happy? Happy is not the word. She turned the empty cup once in her hand. Useful is. His eyes didn't leave her. That sounded like a woman describing a cage. She made her voice light, like it cost her nothing. People don't choose what saves them. They choose what they know. He held her in that gaze a few seconds too long, long enough that she felt it everywhere. She dropped her eyes from his, and the heat climbing into her cheeks gave her away before she could stop it. She didn't understand why he was looking at her like that, and she hated that she couldn't hold steady through it. Eros pushed to his feet. Does the shower work? She stared up at him. Why? Because I'm not spending 12 hours smelling like blood and limestone. Vito never thought to put air down here. He was already moving toward the small washroom. When the water came on behind the door, Isabella sat up straight where she was, listening to it in disbelief. He was actually taking a shower. Isabella got to her feet and poured a little more wine into her cup. Her body had loosened. The ache above her brow dulled to almost nothing, and somewhere in the warmth of it she'd stopped bracing against the walls around her. Her eyes drifted toward the open bathroom door. The mirror caught him before she could look away. Through the steam she saw the bronze of Eros's back, the cut of muscle down his spine, water running off his shoulders. A sound caught in her throat. Oh! She turned her head the other way, fast, and the heat went straight up her neck. She moved through the small room with no idea what to do with herself and drained the rest of the cup to have something to do at all. Eros wasn't going to touch her, she told herself. He wasn't the kind that hurt women like her, and the worst part was that she believed it. He'd had a dozen chances to hurt her. He hadn't taken one. That should have made her feel safer. It didn't. It made him harder to hate. Her head had started to swim, the wine catching up with her, and the simplest thing left was to sleep. She lay back on the bed and let her eyes fall closed. As they grew heavy, she thought of her mother. Once this room had been safety. It had been the place her mother brought her when Vito's anger filled the house upstairs, down the hidden stairs into the quiet where she would sing low and make a game of the dark and hold Isabella against her until the shouting overhead went away. Eros came out of the shower with a towel low at his waist, water still dripping from his hair down the line of his chest. When he looked at the bed, Isabella seemed to be asleep. He crossed and lowered himself onto the edge of the bed. His hand went to her forehead, pushing the damp strands off it to see the wound underneath. No, Anita, don't sleep. She sank her cheek into the thin pillow. Let me sleep, she got out, the words slurring at the edges. So tired. He took her chin and tipped it up. Head wound, wine. You stay awake. Her lashes lifted halfway and dropped again. Whatever she was seeing, it wasn't the room. The words came out small, half-buried. Mama, don't go upstairs. His expression drew tight, and he went still over her for a moment, listening. His fingers went into her hair before he gave them permission to. They moved through it slowly, barely touching. He pressed his thumb to her jaw to rouse her. Come on. You need to wake up. Mama used to sing here. Her mouth curved at something far away. I miss her. He kept stroking her hair, and his voice came lower than before. Here? Did your mother come down here too, Anita? But her head rolled to the side, going slack against the pillow. No, don't sleep. His jaw set. This can turn dangerous. Then he was moving. One arm slid under her knees, the other behind her back, and the room tilted as he lifted her off the bed. She felt herself carried, set down on hard, wet stone, and then the spray came down over her, sharp and freezing. The towel came loose when he knelt beside her, leaving him in nothing but black boxes. He cupped water in his hand and brought it over the cut, rinsing the blood from her brow while she shivered against the tile. The cold hit her, and her eyes flew open. What are you doing? Her teeth had started to chatter. I'm freezing. You've got a 2-inch gash on your forehead. You hit your head hard. His hand stayed gentle at her temple. I shouldn't have given you the wine. You can't sleep on this. Isabella was coming back to herself, and it sharpened her tongue. Get off me. She pushed at his arm. Like my life means anything to you. She tried to get her feet under her and swayed hard. His hand caught her at the waist before she went down. 1 cup of wine doesn't do this to a person. He turned her face up to his and searched her eyes. Her whole body had begun to shake. I'm cold. It came out smaller this time, almost nothing. He gathered her up again and brought her back to the bed. The wet yellow linen clung to her hair and the cloth soaked through. From the small cabinet in the washroom, he pulled out another towel. Sitting down beside her, where she lay still, half-dazed, he started on the buttons down the front of her dress. Her hand came up against his. Don't touch me. Eros stopped and looked at her. Shock, head trauma, wine. You're acting like you're not all there right now, and you're shaking. His voice stayed level, like a man doing a job he'd done before. I have to get you warm. I need to get the wet dress off you. When the buttons gave, she was down to her underwear, and her arms crossed over herself fast. Don't look. This isn't the first time I've seen a woman's body, Anita. He wrapped the towel around her and hung the soaked dress over the back of the chair. She stayed bundled up, still shivering, and he pulled the cover up over her. With her covered and still, Eros got to his feet. He didn't go far. Her mumbling had stayed with him, the singing, the way she'd begged a ghost not to go upstairs. And he started moving through the small space, slower now, taking in what Vito had hidden down here, the kind of things a man stored where no one would look. He kept her talking so she wouldn't drift off and worked the thread she'd handed him in her sleep. Where's your mother now, Anita? He ran his eyes along the shelves while he waited for her to answer and caught on 2 drawers built into the wall beneath them. He worked the first one open and went through it. From the bed, her voice came thick and far away, the whine and the blow to her head still dragging at every word. My mother is dead. His hand went still on the drawer. He didn't turn around right away. When did your mother come down here? I don't want to talk. The words slurred together, half-formed, sleep pulling her back under as she spoke. I'm tired. Pulling the second drawer all the way out, he reached into the gap and felt along the wood behind it. Something was wedged there. He pried it loose and brought it into the light. A photograph. A woman with striking pale eyes looked back at him. This house rising behind her, the garden, the edge of the pool, a cake sat on the table in front of her, and a baby rested in her lap, maybe a year old. He took it in for a long moment, then his gaze moved to Isabella on the bed. He turned the photo over. Written on the back, in faded ink, the 21st of June, 2002.
The date hit him in the same pattern as the code, 2106. A baby turning 1. A smile touched the edge of Eros's mouth, but there was no humor in it. Whose birthday opens the tunnel, Anita? Warmth came first, then the smell of it, soap on top, and under it something intoxicating, scent of his own skin. She was still half asleep, and she turned her face into it and breathed it in, and when her lips moved against it, she could taste the faint salt of him. Her eyes opened. Her cheek was on Eros Sorvino's bare chest. She jerked upright, and the whole picture landed at once. Her underwear, nothing else. His boxers. His arm was still wrapped around her waist, holding her into him like she belonged there. Her fingers flew to her forehead. A dull throb met them, and her gaze dropped to the half-empty wine bottle on the floor. "Oh my God," she whispered. The man who raided her house, and she'd slept on him all night. When she shifted to push up, his arm only drew her in closer. "How's your head, Anita?" His voice came low and thick, close above her. Shame and confusion were moving through her, and under them, something she had no name for. The lamplight was sitting low on his skin, on the hard lines of a face that sleep had only made worse to look at. Look away, she told herself. He's the enemy. But she didn't, and she could feel the heat crawling into her cheeks anyway. His eyes opened slowly. She fixed her face into something else. "Get your hands off me." His gaze traveled over her, her hair spilling against his chest, soft enough to set his skin on edge. The bra, the fury she aimed back at him, and the corner of his mouth curled, slow, like he meant to take his time with the view. "Oh, you're the one sleeping on me." The words came out unbothered, almost lazy. She tried to climb over him. He sat up at the same time, and suddenly there was nowhere for her to go. She landed in his lap, both hands against his chest, her mouth inches from his. Neither of them moved. His hand stayed at her hip, not pulling her closer, not letting her fall. The room went too quiet. Then his eyes dropped to her mouth. Once. When they came back to hers, the sleep was gone from them. "Good morning." His voice came rough, the calm in it worse than any threat. She pushed against him. "What do you think you're doing?" Twisting to get a knee down and climb off. Why are you naked all the time?" The more she fought to get free, the more she ground against him. His grip locked her in place. "Anita, don't." A muscle worked in his jaw, and whatever ease had been in his face was gone, his breath shallow, his eyes hard on hers. "Stop moving like that." She froze. It took her a moment too long to understand why. She was painfully aware of every place they touched. Then the heat went through her so fast she almost hated him for it. Almost. Isabella threw herself off him, snatched the towel from the floor and wrapped it around herself. "You went too hard on the wine." Eros rolled his neck to one side, then the other, and swung his feet to the floor. "I was keeping you awake." "You hit your head. You weren't supposed to sleep it off." He shrugged. We both went under. Isabella turned away to look for her dress, mostly so he wouldn't see how red she'd gone. He stood, turned her by the shoulder, and tipped her chin up with one hand. "Let me see." His thumb moved near the cut. For a second she was caught right there in front of him, close, the blush she'd been hiding nowhere left to hide. His eyes left the wound and found her face, and stayed. "Who said you could put your hands on me whenever you want?" She pulled back from his touch. "Why did you take my dress off? Did you—" She swallowed the rest. He set a hand on his hip, still in nothing but his boxers, standing there like a statue. "After all that, I had to put you under the shower to bring you around." He said it like it bored him. "You were freezing in a soaked dress, so I warmed you up." A faint smile touched his eyes. "You threw the towel off in your sleep, not me." He stretched, in no hurry at all. "I don't need to do anything to a sleeping woman, Anita." His mouth tipped at the corner. "And trust me, if something had happened, you'd remember it." She spotted her dress then, folded neatly over the chair. She grabbed it and started for the bathroom. "What happened? You turn into a saint all of a sudden. Stay away from me." "Women," Eros muttered, pulling on his pants. Save their lives, and somehow you're still the villain. They took the tunnel back, Isabella ahead of him. Has it been 12 hours yet? She threw it back over her shoulder, not slowing down. Eros's voice came easy behind her. You've slept long enough. I'd say we're clear. Her jaw tightened. I hope you didn't watch me while I slept. There was nothing better to look at in that room. The smile came through in his voice, like he meant her to hear it. She kept 3 steps ahead of him. Not because the tunnel was narrow, because every time he came closer, soap and tobacco found her again. She rolled her eyes at the dark and pulled in a slow breath. She hated that she knew the scent of his skin now. Behind her, Eros walked with the torch in one hand. His other hand stayed in his pocket, thumb rubbing once over the edge of the photograph. The corner of his mouth was tipped up, just barely. They reached the door at the end of the tunnel. Hold on. He stepped up to the keypad. I'll do this one. I've learned to expect just about anything from you. His fingers hovered over the keys and didn't move. 1 second, then another. Something about the weight crawled up her spine. He knew the code, so why was he stopping? Isabella was close enough to feel the warmth coming off him when he spoke again. Before we go up. His eyes came to her. What do these numbers mean, Anita? She swallowed. Her answer came out low. They're just numbers. He looked at her, slow and careful. Just numbers? Something moved under the words, quiet and not quite kind. Funny thing is, today's the 21st of June. The floor seemed to drop an inch under her. He knew, and he was letting her watch him know it. She made herself breathe, made herself meet him. Her chin came up. She put her pale eyes straight into his dark ones. Strange coincidence. Eros nodded, like he agreed. The smile stayed at his mouth. It really is. He pressed the keys one at a time, saying each number out loud as he went. 2, 1, 0, 6, 0, 1. Every digit settled on her like a hand at the back of her neck. The lock released with a heavy sound, and the door swung open. Eros pushed through, and the daylight came at them all at once. He lifted a hand against it. Isabella climbed out after him into the garden beside the pool, the sun raw on her face, and for half a second the open air felt less like freedom than like standing somewhere with nowhere left to hide. He glanced back at her over his shoulder. So, hocus pocus. He started toward the main doors of the house, and she followed, every step landing harder than the last. Tony was waiting at the main doors, and the second he saw them he came at a half-run, then stopped short. His eyes went to Eros's bare chest, then to the dried blood down the front of Isabella's yellow dress, and back again, none of it adding up. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Boss, you weren't in the library. You weren't in your room last night. We tore this place apart looking for you, the grounds, the whole coast. He scrubbed both hands back through his hair, lost. Where were you? Eros lifted a hand and stopped him cold. I need fresh clothes, Tony. Did you find us another house? Yes, boss. Something pulled tight in his face. But we've got a problem. 2 of his men came through the garden gate at a run, breathing hard. Nothing, Tony. We checked everywhere. Eros turned a look on Tony, one that asked the question for him. Tony couldn't quite hold it. It's Miss Conti, boss. She ran some time before dawn. Slipped out while we were sleeping. For a moment, Eros only looked at them. At Tony, at the 2 still catching their breath by the gate. When he spoke, his voice dropped into something quiet and cold. 6 men, 1 woman, 1 door. He let it sit. Explain to me how you lost her. Tony's words came fast, almost pleading. Boss, we searched the east wing, the terrace, the staff rooms. Gone is not a place. Eros didn't raise his voice, and that was what shut Tony's mouth. It's a failure. Yours. Isabella's head was already turning, her pulse climbing. Anita, where did you go? The rocks, the cove. Then a second thought hit harder than the first, and the floor of her stomach dropped out from under it. You left me here. You actually left me here.
Tony dragged a hand down his face. "We let you down. Our leverage is gone. What do we do now? We've got nothing to hold over Conti." He looked back at the house like it had betrayed him. "How does everyone in this place just disappear?" Eros's gaze moved off him and landed on Isabella. He ran his tongue slowly along the inside of his cheek. Their eyes met and held, and a smile touched the corner of his mouth with no warmth anywhere in it. "There's a magician in the house, Tony." He said it to his man, but he kept his eyes on her. Isabella turned her back to him so he wouldn't catch the smile pulling at her own mouth. He tipped his head toward the door, that cold amusement still on him. "After you, Anita. From this second on, you don't leave my sight, not once." As she started walking, Eros leaned in close to Tony. "How long has she been gone?" Tony checked the time, jaw tight. 3 hours, give or take." Eros watched Isabella all the way to the door before he answered. "Find the girl. Check the rocks." Isabella had one hand on the door, about to step inside, when a van rolled up to the iron gates. Eros and Tony both turned, eyes narrowing against the light. White panel, painted letters along the side, "A la Creme Bakery." Eros waved the men at the gate to let it through. The van eased to a stop, a few feet from him and Tony. Isabella's fingers locked around the door handle. "Oh no, please no." A middle-aged man climbed out, round-faced and cheerful, balancing an enormous cake box in both arms. He looked from Tony to Eros, a little thrown by the men posted around the drive. "Good morning, sir. Delivery from A la Creme." He hefted the box, working a smile past the guns at the gate. "Miss Vella placed the order. Birthday cake for Miss Conti." Isabella ducked inside, but she couldn't make herself move past the threshold. She pressed close to the gap and watched, her heart slamming against her ribs. That cake was about to say her name out loud. Eros glanced back at the doorway she'd just vanished into, something sharpening behind his eyes. Then he turned to the baker and put out a hand, easy and pleasant. "I can take that." The man handed it over, happy to be rid of the weight. "We did the gold lettering just like she asked, sir. Isabella Conti," he beamed, "and gluten-free exactly as requested. She's going to love it." "Gold letters," Eros repeated softly. A smile touched his mouth and went no deeper. "How thoughtful." The baker's smile thinned, his eyes ticking from Eros to Tony and back. "Is Miss Vella here? She usually signs for the delivery." "She stepped out." Eros shifted the weight against his chest like it was nothing, his gaze drifting back to the dark of the doorway. "I'll see that it gets to her." He carried it inside, slow, in no hurry at all, and Isabella, frozen halfway up the stairs, felt him coming before she heard him. His voice reached her from below, low and easy. "Anita?" The sound of it slid down her spine. She gripped the banister and didn't turn. "Isabella's birthday cake just came." There was something almost gentle in the way it came out, which was exactly what made it land wrong. "The baker was asking for you." She stopped on the step. The color had already gone out of her face. "I didn't see it come in." The words came out thin, barely steady. Tony caught up to him in the hall, glancing back at the van. "When do we head to the new house, boss? And Miss Conti, you want the men to keep searching the rocks?" Eros watched Isabella climb, slow, each step landing heavier than the one before. "Put 3 men on Isabella Conti. They can search as long as they like." He turned toward the cars waiting in the drive. "We'll go ahead." Tony's brows pulled together. "We're not going to look for her ourselves." Eros's eyes stayed on Isabella, still climbing, her hand white on the banister. "No need." He pushed the box back into Tony's hands and lifted his voice just enough to reach her. "And Tony, bring the cake." His mouth curved, watching her back go rigid at the words. It would be rude to waste a birthday. Isabella took the stairs fast and slipped into her own room first, pulling a dress from the closet and grabbing what she needed underneath. Then she started across the hall toward Anita's room, the maid's room, the one no one would question her using. She was halfway across the landing when Eros came up the stairs and caught her mid-stride. She went still for a second, caught running again, and made herself keep walking like she had every reason to. "Don't go getting lost in those tunnels again, Anita." His voice trailed her down the hall, lazy and in no hurry at all. "This time I'll block the exit and leave you down there to argue with the stone."
The smile he was holding back lived at the corner of his mouth. Troublemaker. She didn't slow down. She pushed inside, shut the door, and let herself breathe. In here, being Anita still made sense. She'd shower and change where no one would think to wonder why. At the far end of the corridor, Eros stepped into Vito Conti's bedroom. Huge, cold, expensive. Every surface arranged like a place no one was meant to actually live in. He moved through it without hurry, opening drawers, checking the desk, the wardrobe, looking less for clothes than for the kind of man who'd slept here. Ledgers, watches, keys, old papers. Not one photograph of the daughter Vito Conti paraded to the world as his pride. Not on the dresser, not by the bed, not tucked into a single drawer. Eros's hand came to rest on the edge of the wardrobe, a father who kept no picture of his only child. He filed it away, quiet, the way he kept every detail that didn't add up. He pulled a clean white shirt from the rail. A knock landed on the door. Tony's voice came through it. "The other house is ready, boss. Men are already in place. Security's tight." Eros pulled the shirt on over the marks she'd bandaged down in the tunnel, working the buttons without looking up. "Call the pilot, now." His tone didn't lift. "I don't stay long inside another man's trap." By the time she came out of the shower, she'd changed into something of her own. A white dress she'd grabbed without thinking, cut lower at the front than she'd have chosen, but there was nothing to be done about that now. She faced the mirror and took stock of herself. The cut above her brow had at least stopped bleeding. So what happens now? The thought sat heavy in her chest. If she knew her father at all, and she did, he would put a bullet in Eros Sorvino the first chance he got. The thought should have steadied her. It didn't. She didn't want Eros dead, and that was the part that frightened her. Then the colder one came right behind it. What if Eros reached Vito first? She let her back come to rest against the mirror, the glass cold through the thin cotton of the dress. Please, God, don't make me watch one of them kill the other. 3 hard raps cut through the thought. "Anita." Eros, close on the other side. "The helicopter's coming. We're leaving. Now." She pulled the door open. His gaze dropped from her face to the bare line of her collarbone, lower, and came back up, slow enough that she felt it travel, like a hand that never touched her. Something flickered behind his eyes. Then he buried it. "Get in front of me." He stepped back to let her pass. "We're leaving the house." She walked ahead of him with her chin up, every step a small act of defiance, and threw the words back over her shoulder. "You don't have an Isabella Conti to marry anymore. What are you going to do with me? Why don't you let me go too?" A small smile touched his mouth. "Because, Anita," he said her name slow, like he was deciding something with it. "I don't want to spend my days in Malta without you." She looked at him over her shoulder, her voice gone pointed and sharp. "I hope you don't think 12 hours in a tunnel made us friends." He closed the distance in 2 strides and came down the stairs beside her, his mouth near her ear. "Who said anything about being friends?" The helicopter lifted off the mansion roof with the 4 of them inside, the pilot up front, Tony beside him, Eros and Isabella in the back. The coast was falling away beneath them, the white cliffs and the long blue water shrinking by the second, when a smaller island came up fast, low and pale against the sea. Isabella knew it the second it cleared the window, her stomach tightened. "Are we staying on this island?" Eros watched her reaction more than the view. "Maybe I should have asked you about my new house." His mouth tilted. "You're the one who's from here, after all." She kept her eyes on the rock coming up to meet them and let her voice go light, with an edge under it. "This used to be a quarantine island. They'd bring the sick out here and just leave them. Back in the 1700s, this was where somebody decided who lived and who didn't." She glanced at him then. No escape, no medicine, no second chance. And she was hearing her own situation in every word of it. A strip of stone between surviving and dying, the sea standing in for a wall. She'd grown up in one cage already. This one was just smaller. "Thanks for the history lesson." Eros laughed, low and unbothered. "Honestly, makes me like the place even more." The helicopter banked and came down over it, and the house was the cliff. Someone had cut it straight into the white rock face. Tall vertical ribs of pale stone framing the glass, a narrow jetty running out into water so clear it looked lit from below. A boat sat moored against it, small and white and very far down. They set down on the flat crown of the rock, and from there a private elevator carried them down through the cliff into the rooms hidden inside it. Tony stepped out first and looked the place over. "It's secure, boss. Nobody's getting in here without us knowing." Eros clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Good choice." Then his gaze slid to Isabella, and the corner of his mouth curved. "If this house has tunnels, Anita, I'm locking you to me." The elevator opened into a living room carved straight out of the rock. Pale stone walls were rising into shadow above them, and a single tall slot of a window cut the cave in two, opening onto a blade of sea, the light coming in soft and gold off the lamps. It was beautiful, and it was a cage, and Isabella could feel both at once. Eros stepped out and looked it over. It will do. Tony came out behind him. "Next move, boss." Eros started unbuttoning his shirt. "I'm going for a swim, Tony. Not like we get a vacation like this every day." Isabella folded her hands in front of her, watching him like he'd lost his mind. "You raided his house, took his daughter, humiliated him on his own island." Her shoulder lifted and the corner of her mouth went sharp. "Men like Vito don't pay after that. They punish. Besides, you don't even have his daughter to bargain with anymore." Eros raised a brow, and the look he gave her was loaded. "Don't I?" He laughed low in his chest. "You talk too much. You said you run houses, Anita, so go run mine. Start with the kitchen. We've been hungry for hours." Isabella stood there, cooking. Of all the things that could give her away, somehow this was the one she'd never planned for. Eros was already heading for the water, talking over his shoulder as he went. "You asked why I'm keeping you around. Consider this your answer." A glance at his watch, not breaking stride. "I want food when I come back. 1/2 an hour." She called it after him before she could stop herself. "There are sharks in these waters. I hope they're really hungry." Eros stopped at the doorway, glanced back once and smiled. "They can wait their turn." Isabella stalked into the kitchen and yanked the refrigerator open. The kitchen wasn't empty. That was almost worse. It was stocked like rich men thought people lived on alcohol, coffee, and things wrapped in gold foil. Wine, more wine, beer, a bottle of tequila, olives, a wedge of cheese, a few boxes of pasta, and dead center on the middle shelf, a birthday cake, gold letters across the top spelling out Isabella Conti, gluten-free, exactly as ordered. "What is this?" she muttered, staring at the shelves. "Who stocks a kitchen like this?" The door swung shut, and she leaned back against it. So, which was more tragic, she thought, that she was about to cook for the men who'd dragged her here, or that she had no idea how. A whole life spent running this household, and she'd never once cooked in it herself. Her eye went back to the pasta. That, at least, she could manage. Boil water, drop it in. Even she could do that much. Then her shoulders dropped. She couldn't eat a bite of it, not gluten-free, and nothing in her stomach for almost a day. Of course. The one thing she could make was the one thing she couldn't touch. She filled a pot, set it on the burner to boil, and called out, "Tony?" He appeared in the doorway a moment later. "Miss Vella? You called?" She set a hand on her hip. "And what exactly am I supposed to cook with? Olives and tequila?" Tony looked at her like the question had no answer. Isabella didn't wait for one. "Someone needs to go get food? Write this down." He pulled out his phone, and she rattled it off. Tomatoes, fruit, peppers, meat, anything a person can actually eat. Of course. He gave her a sour look on his way out, and she caught the words under his breath as he went. "Taking orders from the maid. Perfect." While the water heated, her thoughts slipped away from the kitchen. "Anita, where are you? Did you make it to the marina? And you, Papa? What are you planning out there?" Bottle of water in hand, she drifted out into the living room. Beyond the wall of glass, the sea caught the light and threw it back, and there was Eros, out at the edge of the rocks. She watched him dive, clean, dark, gone. The sea swallowed him whole. A long moment passed. Then another. Her feet carried her closer to the glass before she decided to move, eyes raking the surface. Where was he? Where was he? He broke the surface. Head back, water flying off his hair. Then he was swimming, long and easy, like the sea belonged to him, and she couldn't look away. Her tongue moved over her lips without her say-so. "Where'd he even learn to swim like that?" she murmured. He swam a while before he made for the rocks and pulled himself up out of the water, his back to her, wet bronze across his shoulders, the long muscles of his back shifting as he reached up and dragged both hands through his hair, slicking it off his face. Water ran down him in lines, and she lifted the bottle to her lips without thinking. The cold rim touched her. For 1 second she felt the water on him instead. She set it down. "You think you're irresistible, don't you, Eros Sorvino?" But the scent of him was still in her head somehow, soap and salt and skin, and for 1 weak second it pulled her back a few hours, to the dark, to his weight against her, the heat of him under her hands. From the kitchen, the pot rattled hard on the burner, and she jumped half out of her skin. Her eyes snapped back to the glass. Eros had turned. He stood at the edge of the rocks, water running from his hair, one hand braced on the stone, his eyes fixed straight on her, caught. Her fingers tightened around the bottle. He tapped the watch on his wrist, slow and deliberate, and through the glass his mouth shaped 2 silent words. 15 minutes. The plates were already out on the dining table. In the kitchen, Isabella was standing over the pot, glaring at the pasta like it had personally wronged her, and she grated the parmesan she'd found across the top of it. Good enough. That would have to be it. Eros passed the kitchen doorway without slowing. "Anita, time's up." She was watching him as he went by. White linen shirt, linen trousers, everything loose and easy in the heat. Dressed like that, he didn't look like a man who took houses apart. He looked like someone's idea of a vacation. She carried the pasta out in one big bowl and set it in the middle of the table. Both men were looking at it. Then Eros raised his gaze to her, slow. "This is it." Isabella lifted one shoulder. That's what there was. The two of them served themselves without much enthusiasm. Eros turned his fork over in the bowl. "Shouldn't there at least be sauce on it?" She was cutting a banana into neat pieces with a knife and fork, and she didn't look up. "There's ketchup in the fridge." His eyes stayed on her hands. "And why aren't you eating any pasta?" Heat climbed into her face before she could stop it. "I'm on a diet." The corner of his mouth twitched, and he fought it down. "Trying to get to 100 pounds? He stood, lifted the serving spoon and dropped a portion onto her plate. "You're going to eat this." Isabella's chin came up. "I'm saving my appetite for the cake." Eros tipped his head. "That's Isabella's cake." "You let Isabella slip away." She held his gaze. "She's not here. And I don't think you're going to find her. So I wouldn't count on her showing up for her own cake." Eros set his fork down at the edge of his plate. "Then you're not getting any cake until I see you put a bite of that in your mouth." Her jaw tightened, the anger sitting hot in her chest. "Fine." She speared a forkful, lifted it, and put it in her mouth, and she held his eyes the whole time she was chewing, slow, refusing to be the one who looked away. Eros raised a brow. "There." And he went back to eating. Tony's head moved from one of them to the other. Isabella swallowed, and the worry started low in her stomach before the food even reached it. Whatever was about to happen to her, it was already too late to take back. Tony's phone buzzed against the table. He picked up, listened, then lowered it a few inches. "Boss, they picked up Miss Conti on the road to the marina." His eyes flicked to Eros. "You want her brought here?" A slow smile touched Eros's mouth, and his gaze drifted over to Isabella. She kept her eyes on Tony, something uneasy moving through them. "No." Eros wound pasta around his fork in no rush at all. "We'll keep her somewhere else. Have them hold her at an apartment in the city." "But, boss," Tony shifted. "Vito Conti has people here. He could find out where she is." Eros put the bite in his mouth and took his time with it. "That's exactly what I'm hoping for, Tony." Then he turned his head, and his eyes settled on Isabella and stayed there. She pushed the banana around her plate, not tasting any of it now, one thought gnawing at her and refusing to let go. Eros Sorvino had figured something out. Isabella had picked the room that faced the sea. She was lying on the bed, staring up at the ceiling, and her stomach was turning over on itself. Her body had never tolerated gluten, not once. One bite of that pasta, and now her own body was getting ready to betray the lie her mouth had kept alive, unless she could keep it from Eros long enough to ride it out. Out on the terrace, Eros stood with his eyes on the water, Tony beside him. "Tony, I need the papers ready in a few days." He didn't turn his head. "You understand the plan." Tony nodded, then frowned at the sea. "You're really going to marry Isabella Conti, boss? Wouldn't killing Vito be the cleaner way?" Something cold moved behind Eros's smile. "Vito's going to watch everything he owns slip through his fingers. Dying's easy. I want him to suffer." He turned from the rail. "Keep the men ready." Tony went inside. Eros stayed where he was a moment longer, his eyes on the water. Isabella Conti. The name came out low, almost to himself. "Are you as innocent as you look?" Then he followed, hands in his pockets, and he was halfway down the corridor when he heard it. The sound of someone being sick, coming from one of the rooms. The door gave when he pushed it. Inside, Isabella was on the bathroom floor, bent over the toilet, retching. He crouched down beside her. "Can you breathe?" He reached over and pushed the hair back off her face. Isabella jerked her head aside. "Get out of here!" It came out raw between breaths. He didn't go anywhere. He brought her up off the floor and wiped the cool water across her face. That was when he saw them. Red blotches climbing her neck, spreading up from her collarbone. Without a word, he gathered her against him, carried her to the bed and laid her down. "Tony," his voice carried through the door, "bring me ice, and find a doctor. Keep him on standby." Isabella shook her head against the pillow. "No, doctor, it's just an allergy." Eros didn't even look at her. "I said stand by." Tony was back fast with the ice. Eros wrapped it in a cloth and brought it to her throat, and the first touch of cold made her flinch. She turned her face away from him. "Leave me alone. I can do it myself." Eros didn't stop. "No." His thumb held the cloth steady against her skin. "I'll do it." The cold dragged slow down the side of her neck. She told herself that was why she shivered. It wasn't. It was the weight of his eyes following the cloth, steady and patient, like he had nowhere else to be and meant to spend every minute of it right here. She kept her stare on the ceiling and tried to breathe like a woman who felt none of it. She pushed the words out angry, because angry was safer. "Shouldn't you be with your Miss Conti right now? Why won't you leave me alone? Why do you even care?" Eros didn't look away from what he was doing. "You interest me more, Anita." The cold traced lower, slow. "The unfortunate part is that I'm supposed to marry her." His eyes lifted to hers then. "If Isabella were you, I might enjoy the marriage more than the revenge." The words went straight through her. Her pulse jumped before she could catch it, and she felt the heat climb her face, the one place the ice couldn't reach. Don't let him see it. Whatever he was doing to her, he wasn't going to get the satisfaction of watching it work. She kept her face still. Her body had other ideas. She shoved his hand off her. "Well, I'm not, and I'm done with this pointless little prison of yours." Her open palm came up against his chest and pushed. "Get out of my life." His hand closed around her wrist. "Calm down, Anita." Her breath was coming fast and shallow now, and she couldn't seem to slow it. "Your nerves are shot." His voice stayed low, without heat. "The last 2 days have been hard on you. I want you to calm down." His fingers moved into her hair and stroked it back. "I'm not going to hurt you. First we get these welts down, then you rest." A glance at her throat. "And tonight we eat a real meal, all right?" He studied the red marks. "The ice is working." Her chest was still rising and falling too fast, but she stopped fighting him. Her eyes went somewhere else, anywhere but his face. Eros got to his feet. "Rest now. I'll come check on you. We eat at 7. At the door he looked back once at the woman in the bed. Then he was walking the corridor with his hands in his pockets, something working behind his eyes. "Stubborn girl," he murmured. Isabella woke to a room gone gold. The sun was dropping toward the water, and the light came in long and warm across the bed where she'd slept the afternoon away. At the sink she washed her face, and when she lifted her head to the mirror, the welts were gone. Her skin had come back to itself clear, like none of it had happened. But it had. She remembered the worry that had sat in his eyes when he found her on the floor. She remembered the cold of the cloth and the careful way his hand had moved it along her throat like she was something he didn't want to break. And she remembered what he'd said while he did it. If Isabella were you, I might enjoy the marriage more than the revenge. For one strange moment, a thought slipped in before she could stop it. What if the only way to keep the two of them from destroying each other was for her to actually be Isabella Sorvino? What if that was the door out? She caught her lower lip between her teeth. No, no, Isabella, don't be ridiculous. You are not going to marry that man. The corner of her mouth tugged, and she let out a small laugh at herself in the glass. Stop thinking about insane things. But on her way out the door, she tried not to think about why her heart was beating the way it was, knowing she was about to see him. The terrace had been set like something out of a different life. A long table, candles already lit against the falling light, and food laid out the way she remembered it from summers she wasn't supposed to remember. Fish, 3 kinds, shrimp, small Maltese plates she could have named with her eyes closed. The smell reached her first, and hunger moved through her so sharply she picked up a shrimp before she thought better of it. That was when his voice came from behind her. The sun sets beautifully here, doesn't it? Isabella made herself keep her eyes on the table. Why is it set for 2? Eros came around to her side. Because it's just the 2 of us. He drew her chair back for her. She sat, and she watched him out of the corner of her eye while he did it. The ease of him, the way he moved like the whole island ran on his schedule. He filled her glass with sparkling water. His own he filled with wine. She looked from one glass to the other, and then at him, the question plain on her face. Eros sat across from her. After your little adventure with the wine yesterday, the stress you've been under, and the reaction you had today, alcohol isn't a good idea for you tonight. Isabella reached over, took the bottle, and poured the wine into her own glass herself. I'll be the one to decide that. Eros watched her do it. Lucky for you, it's a Chardonnay. It won't hit too hard. She ate. For 5 minutes she didn't lift her head, didn't slow down, and the whole time she could feel him watching her across the candles. He let her get most of the way through the plate before he broke it. What are you planning for yourself, Anita? His voice was easy, unbothered. Do you mean to grow old in the Conti's service, or is there something else? She stopped with her fork halfway up, set it down, and looked at him. You're wasting your time trying to figure me out, she told him, still chewing. You should be getting to know Miss Conti right now, not me. Eros took a slow sip of his wine. A smile moved at his mouth. But I'm the one who wants to know you, not Isabella Conti. She swallowed. Why? There was nothing sharp in it this time, just the question. Eros leaned back in his chair. You know why. You're a smart girl. The candlelight caught the dark of his eyes. Tell me something, Anita. Pretend we met tonight. Just a man and a woman at dinner. A blind date, if you need a name for it. Isabella tilted her head and narrowed her eyes at him. After the 2 days we've had, that's not going to be easy. Eros ran his tongue slow along the inside of his cheek. Then try. Fine. She leaned forward and set her arms on the table, closer to him than she'd meant to get. What scares you the most? His answer came before she'd finished the question. Failing the people who trusted me to keep them alive. Her smile froze halfway. You answered too fast. The ease had gone out of his voice now. Some answers don't change. When you fail someone who trusted you and you watch them get hurt for it, you don't forget that kind of pain. And believe me, you spend the rest of your life making sure you never live it twice. He let that sit, then turned it back on her. And you? What scares you? Isabella looked out at the water. The sun had nearly gone now, the last of it bleeding along the edge of the sea. Who I am, she whispered. Eros's brows drew together. She kept her eyes on the glass instead of on him. When I was a child, I read a book about a girl everyone envied. The bright one, she went on, turning the stem slow between her fingers. Everyone wanted her for a friend. Every man wanted her for more than that. She had the perfect life. The candle threw light up the side of her face. Eros didn't move, didn't reach for his wine. He just let her talk. Isabella's mouth tipped, not quite a smile. And then, one day, she figured out it was only the look of a perfect life. She'd learned how to be wanted long before she ever learned how to be known.
She lifted her eyes to him for the first time since she'd started. And when it hit her that nobody had ever actually seen the real her, she found out what she was really afraid of. Which was? Eros's voice was quiet. Isabella's gaze dropped. What if no one wants the real me? He had gone very still across the table, watching her in a way he hadn't a moment ago, like a man recalculating something. Isabella felt the look land and reached for her drink too fast. It was only a book, she added, lighter. I had too much time as a girl. She tipped the wine back and swallowed more of it than she meant to. Why had she told him any of that? The words had come out of her before she'd decided to let them. That was the problem with him, with the low voice and the eyes that didn't move off her, sitting there across the candles like the night belonged to him. A minute more of it, and she'd have answered anything he asked. The thought put an edge in her, and she held on to the edge because it was steadier than the rest of what she was feeling. Eros let it go, or looked like he did. And what happened to her? His voice stayed low. The girl in the book. Isabella smiled, small. She got a life nothing like the one she thought she wanted. A husband, children. A small town somewhere she never once imagined she'd end up. Her voice had gone somewhere softer without her meaning it to, and she heard it and pulled it back. But it's a story. Stories always finish happy. The smile thinned. Reality is a great deal harder than that. Eros did not answer right away. He only watched her across the table, the wine untouched in his hand now. Maybe she was afraid of the wrong thing. The words came quiet, almost to himself. The shine was never the interesting part. Isabella looked up. Eros's eyes held hers. The part she hid was. It went straight through her, the way the truth does when it comes from someone who doesn't know he's saying it. Isabella held the glass a little too tightly and kept her eyes down, away from his, not trusting what he might read on her face. Eros set his glass down. Anita. His voice dropped just enough to pull her eyes to him. You asked why I care about you. Let me tell you what I see. He lifted his glass a little, tipped it toward her. A beautiful young woman first. Any man with blood in him would see that much. The corner of his mouth moved. But that's the easy part. Any fool stops there. Isabella kept her eyes on her plate. She'd been called beautiful before by men who wanted something from her and never once meant it. It had always landed like nothing. She waited for the same nothing now. It didn't come. Eros wasn't finished. Then you open your mouth and you fight me. There's a fire in you that doesn't ask permission. His eyes stayed on her. But it isn't the fire that holds me, Anita. It's the woman underneath it, the one who looks like she's spent her whole life carrying her own weight because she never trusted anyone to hold it without letting her fall. He leaned in, just slightly. A woman like that doesn't put the weight down for just anyone. His eyes held hers. That's what makes a man want to be dangerous enough to earn the right. Isabella swallowed and looked out at the water before he could catch what the words had done to her. When she turned back, she'd found the fire again. You've known me 2 days. That's a lot of confidence for a man who knows nothing about me. How could you? Eros sat back and looked at her. A few seconds. To her it felt like a lot longer. She felt like he could see straight through her, like there was nothing left to hide behind, and no man in 25 years had ever made her feel that. How a man like him had gotten this far under her skin, she had no idea. And somewhere under all of it, a smaller voice told her to be careful. He saw too much. One wrong word, and he'd see the rest. When he answered, it was quiet. Because I know what it's like to never get to be your own person. His eyes didn't leave her. To live the part you're handed. To be afraid of who's left if you set it down and fight to hold on to whatever piece of yourself is still yours. Isabella bit the inside of her lip to keep her face from giving her away. Eros rested his arms on the table and looked at the sea a while. The quiet stretched out between them. His hand shifted once near the stem of his glass, as if he'd almost reached across the table and thought better of it. Isabella saw it, felt it, all the way to the bone, her stomach pulling tight and her heart refusing to settle. Then he turned back to her. You can't really know someone in 2 days. His voice had dropped, and for a moment he wasn't holding it back. "If I'd had the choice, Anita, I'd have met you before this war." His eyes stayed on her. "Then I'd have taken my time." It hit her low and stayed there. There was a truth right behind her teeth, pushing to get out. She looked down before he could see it. A maid named Anita had no reason in the world to cry at a thing like that. Without taking his eyes off her, Eros lifted a hand and signaled toward the doors behind her. A moment later, Tony came out carrying a cake in both hands, a knife balanced on top. "Boss, can we finally have a slice of this thing?" He set it down in the middle of the table. Across the top, in gold script, it read, "Happy 25th birthday, Isabella." For a second, nobody moved. Everybody just looked at it. Eros reached into the box Tony had left and came up with a candle. "They sent this along with it. Might as well do it right." He pushed the candle into the frosting and lit it. Isabella looked at him, uncertain, caught somewhere she hadn't expected to be. Eros looked back at her and didn't look away. Isabella made herself break the look. "It'd be a nice thing to send the cake over to Miss Conti tonight." A small smile touched the corner of his mouth. "I think it's exactly where it's supposed to be." They held each other's eyes across the candle. And there it was. The thing Isabella had been afraid of all night. He knew. She was almost certain of it. He had figured out she was Isabella, and he was letting her sit here, not knowing how much he'd seen. Or he was testing her, and the cake was the bait, and one wrong flicker on her face would hand him the rest. She couldn't tell which, and that was worse than either. Her heart was going so hard she was sure he could read it in her throat. Tony cleared his throat, breaking into the longest look either of them had held all night. "So, are we waiting on the birthday girl, or can somebody cut this?" Isabella made herself shrug. "I've never liked blowing out candles." Eros didn't look away from her. "Then don't." He reached over and pinched the flame out between two fingers, slow, like he had all the time in the world. Then he picked up the knife and held it out to her, handle first. Isabella took it, cut into the cake, and started lifting slices onto plates. The whole time, she could feel Eros's eyes on her, steady, never quite leaving. He took a bite of his cream and strawberry. "I've never had anything gluten-free before." He sounded almost surprised. "It's not half bad." Tony was already on his second slice. "Boss, I'm telling you we should make this cake thing a regular event." Isabella smiled at that, but her fork was only pushing the cake around her plate. If Eros Sorvino had worked out who she really was, then she had a much bigger problem than a birthday she couldn't claim, and she needed to decide what to do about it. Every time his eyes found hers across the table, she looked back out at the sea, because it was easier than holding them. Then his phone lit up with a video call. Eros looked at the screen, and the smile that crossed his face had nothing warm in it. "There he is, the guest we've been waiting for," he answered, and Vito Conti's face filled the screen, his voice loud enough to carry across the whole terrace. "Eros!" It cracked against the stone. "I want to see my daughter." Vito's face stayed on the screen, the jaw tight under the grey. "I'm ready to give you what you asked for. There's a ship leaving the Bahamas for the New York docks, in your name. But I want to see my daughter first." Eros smiled. "Not what I asked for, Vito. What you stole from me." He let it sit there. "And if you want to see your daughter—" His eyes drifted off the screen and settled on Isabella. She was fighting a dozen things at once, whether to let her father hear her voice, whether to sit still and watch what Eros did next. She kept quiet, because quiet was the only move she trusted. His gaze came back to the phone. "I'll show you, right now." He tapped the screen and spoke to whoever picked up. "Put Miss Conti on." Anita's face came up on the call. Isabella held her breath and listened. "There." Eros leaned back. "Father and daughter? You've got 20 seconds. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Anita found her voice. "I'm fine, Papa. Don't worry about me." Vito leaned in close to his own camera, and the words came careful, measured, the way a man sets a glass down where it won't tip. "Are they treating you both well? Has anyone hurt either of you?" Anita's answer caught for half a second. "No. I'm in an apartment.
But Anita isn't... Eros cut the line. He turned back to Vito. You saw her. She's fine. But if that ship isn't in the harbor in 3 days, or you so much as think about sending men onto this island, your daughter dies. Isabella's blood ran cold. He couldn't actually do that, could he? When Vito spoke again, it was the voice of a man pressing down on something with both hands. Eros, this is between you and me. You don't drag women into it. That's beneath a man. Eros took a sip of his wine. You're right. He set the glass down without a sound. Which is why Isabella is going to be mine. On paper, she'll die for you. In every way that counts, she'll be my wife. And you will never see her again. His thumb moved once over the rim of the glass. Good night, Vito. Eros, wait. Something moved under the older man's voice. Wait. Where's the girl who works for her? The assistant. Eros tipped his head a fraction. Since when do you keep such a close count of the help, Vito? Across the table, Isabella had gone white. Eros looked straight at her then, and he kept looking at her while he spoke. Anita is with me. She serves in my house. Isabella's chin came up. Whatever she felt, the fire of it reached her eyes before she could stop it, and the sight of it pulled a slow smile out of him. When that ship docks, he went on, his eyes never leaving her, I'll show you both of them. He ended the call. Isabella was on her feet before she'd decided to stand. For 2 hours, you almost made me forget what you are. Her voice held steady, which cost her more than shaking would have. Thank you for the reminder. She turned and walked inside, and the anger was the only thing holding her up. Tony caught the look on Eros's face as she went. We starting, boss? Eros nodded, slow. We're starting, Tony. Tony got to his feet. At the edge of the terrace, he stopped. This thing you've got for her, is it going to change the plan? Eros let his head fall back against the chair, his eyes on the dark line where the sea met the sky. I'm never handing Isabella Conti back to Vito, Tony. Tony nodded once and left him there. Eros lifted his glass again and drank, the water moving black and slow below the terrace. Morning came in off the water, and the first thing Isabella saw when she opened her eyes was the sea filling the window from one side to the other. She crossed to the glass. Out past the rocks, Eros was opening up the throttle on the speedboat, cutting a white line into the blue, and she stood there watching until the boat was a speck, and then nothing at all. Eros Sorvino. The name had been moving through her mind since the second he caught her at the edge of the cliff, and no amount of good sense had managed to quiet it. And last night, the dream. His hands moving over her, slow, taking their time, and in it she hadn't pushed them away. Even now awake, she could feel the ghost of it warming her skin. She got dressed and went down to the kitchen, still half in the dream. Tony was by the elevator with one of the men, the two of them talking low. She barely registered them. What stopped her was the counter. Lined up along it, like someone had set them out on purpose, were packages of gluten-free crackers, gluten-free bread, half a shelf's worth. She went still. He'd noticed. A man like him, who missed nothing, had been watching her closely enough to catch the one thing she'd tried hardest to hide. Part of her warmed at it before she could stop it. The rest of her went cold, better to be sharp than to feel the other thing, so she turned on Tony. What is all this? Tony glanced over. We went shopping this morning. Boss said he's going gluten-free from now on, Miss Vella. Her eyes narrowed and the words came out sweet enough to cut. How very manly of him. Tony turned away fast, but not before she caught him fighting his mouth. Crackers and cheese went onto a plate, and Tony watched her put it together. Boss had fresh eggs brought in, said he wants you eating those especially. She kept her eyes on the cheese, not on Tony. Maybe he should come feed them to me himself. Tony looked away like the wall had suddenly become interesting. She carried the plate out to the terrace. The whole bay was laid out under the morning sun, and she stood at the rail eating, thinking that for a man who kept calling her a maid, he was doing an impressive amount of serving. The thought tugged one corner of her mouth up before she could stop it. She was halfway through her coffee when the speedboat cut back toward the cliff in a hard white line, water breaking open behind it. Eros stood at the wheel, bare-chested, the sun on his shoulders, one hand loose on the throttle like the sea had been built for him. Isabella lowered her coffee. Of course. The words went into her coffee, low just for her. Eros Sorvino, half naked again. As if being that easy to look at wasn't enough, the man had to make a habit of putting the rest of himself on display. The boat slowed at the jetty below the terrace. Eros looked up at her and lifted a hand. Anita, come down. She turned her face toward the horizon and pretended she hadn't heard him. Underneath it, she was enjoying this more than she had any right to, and she knew it. He called up to her, loud enough to carry, the amusement plain in it. Or I come up? She set her cup on the rail and took her time about it, then went down the stone steps toward the water, slow, as if any part of this had been her idea. Eros was waiting in the boat, one hand on the wheel. Get on! I'm taking you somewhere incredible! Isabella stopped at the edge of the jetty and folded her arms. I'm a local, remember. There's nowhere on this water I don't already know. Eros held out his hand to her across the gap. Not this one. She didn't take it. His smile deepened. Stubborn before breakfast. I should have expected that. And before she could give him an answer, his hands closed at her waist, and he lifted her down into the boat, easy, like she weighed nothing. Her feet hit the deck, and for the length of one breath she was too close to him, close enough to feel the heat coming off his skin. He nodded her toward the seat beside the wheel. Sit. She sat because the boat shifted under her, not because he'd told her to. The engine roared, and the boat lunged forward, and Isabella grabbed the sides. They were flying now, the hull pounding the water, spray bursting up and raining down over Eros, sliding down his chest, his shoulders, all of him. The wind carried his scent to her, salt and warm skin, and something darker she'd given up pretending not to notice. It was too much to look at. She squeezed her eyes shut. Don't look. Don't think about him. Think about literally anything else. His hand came down on her knee. Are you scared? She opened her eyes. He was already watching her, close, the sun catching every fleck of dark navy. And there was something in the way he looked at her, a question that actually wanted the truth, that cared more about what was going on inside her right now than anything out on that water. Isabella swallowed, and the word came out of her barely louder than the engine. No. His mouth curved, slow, and there was nothing cold in it for once. Then stop holding the boat. He took her hand off the side and set it against his waist, against warm, bare skin. Hold on to me. Beautiful. Beautiful. The word got under her skin so fast it made her angry. What made it worse was that she didn't move her hand. She left it right where he'd put it. The most dangerous man she knew, the one who'd threatened to bury her father 2 nights ago, had called her beautiful like it cost him nothing, and she let her palm stay against him while the island shrank behind them, and the open water came rushing up to meet the boat. The cave opened around them slowly, the engine dropping to a low growl. At first there was only shadow, wet stone, turquoise water glowing under the boat. Then the dark widened, and Isabella saw it. A small white beach hidden inside the rock, lit from a gap high above where the cliff opened to the sky. Oh my God! Her eyes went wide and bright, and the cool she'd been holding on to all morning fell away in an instant. She came up out of her seat without deciding to. I didn't know this was here. It's beautiful. Eros watched the delight break across her face, and he smiled. Neither did I. He moved to the rope, looping it around an outcrop of stone. Found it this morning. Her eyes were still on him, so he added it, quieter, like it was nothing. Thought you should see it. Isabella watched him knot the rope. There was something almost boyish in his face for a second, not soft, exactly, not harmless, just pleased, like he'd found something rare and had thought of her before he could stop himself. This was the man who'd stormed her father's house with armed men at his back, and he'd brought her here, to the most beautiful thing on this whole coast, only to watch her see it. She didn't get her face under control in time. Eros looked up from the rope and caught all of it. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he straightened. Now we swim for it. No? She crossed her arms over the thin dress. I don't have a swimsuit in case you hadn't noticed. He came toward her across the deck, slow, enjoying himself. You're going to let a dress keep you out of water like this?
She took a step back, gripping a fistful of the dress. "It's not a swimsuit." "Then we'll ruin a dress?" He was almost on her now. "I'll buy you a new one." She got as far as opening her mouth before his arms came under her and swept her clean off her feet. "Eros, stop! I'm going to get soaked!" The laugh was already in it, and she hated that it was. He went still with her held against his chest and looked down at her. "You know, that's the first time you've said my name." Isabella's lips parted. Nothing came out. The corner of his mouth moved. "I wondered when you'd finally use it." And with her in his arms, he stepped off the side and took them both into the water. Under the water, everything went blue and silent. Isabella opened her eyes and found him already looking at her, his arms still wrapped tight around her, not because she was sinking, because he hadn't let go. For one impossible second there was no Vito, no Conti, no Anita, only his eyes open in the water holding hers, and she wished with an ache that scared her that they could stay down here, beneath the surface, outside every name that had ever been used to own her. Let time stop, she thought. Let it be this. Just the two of them, down here, far from all of it, looking at each other like this. Let life be only this. They broke the surface together, gasping. Eros pushed the wet hair back off her face. "That dress is fighting the water." She kicked back a stroke, treading water, and fired it right back at him. "It's a dress. That's what they do when a man throws you in the sea." His gaze moved over her, dark and amused. "Then take it off." He let it settle. "Or let it drown you. Your choice." She held his gaze and slipped one strap down, then the other, watching his face change by degrees. Eros didn't touch her. Somehow that made it worse. The dress loosened in the water and drifted around her waist like a pale thing giving up. She pushed it the rest of the way down, kicked free of it, and shoved the wet cloth against his chest. He grinned, white teeth flashing, peeled the wet dress off himself, and tossed it into the boat behind him. "There she is." Isabella was already 3 strokes away. "Race you, tough guy." Eros raised an eyebrow. "I'll give you 5 strokes." She tossed it back over her shoulder. "Generous," he almost laughed. "Arrogant. You'll survive." And she was gone, laughing, cutting through the turquoise with everything she had. He watched her go, the laugh trailing back to him over her shoulder, and something in him went painfully still. He hadn't felt this young in years. Then he went after her. Her feet found the sand first. She dragged herself up onto it and dropped down onto her back, chest heaving, the gap in the rock above letting the sun pour straight through it like a window onto the sky. Eros came down beside her a moment later. "I won!" She threw it at the sky, breathless from the swim. He turned his head to look at her. "If you say so." She laughed up at the sky, and it surprised her how easy it came. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this light, this far from everything heavy in her life. The sun was warm on her wet skin. Eros was close enough to feel, and for once she wasn't guarding a single thing. The words just spilled out of her, happy and unthinking. "I really can't believe I never knew this was here. Whenever I came to Malta in the summers, my father always used to—" She stopped. The name was out before she could catch it. She shut her eyes. One careless second, drunk on the day and the water and the man beside her, all that excitement and happiness and the pull of him, and she'd let her own mouth ruin everything. Then she felt his fingers move into her wet hair. She opened her eyes. Eros had propped himself on one elbow, his face right above hers, brushing the wet strands off her cheek. Isabella's lips parted. She was giving everything away now, and she couldn't stop it. She pulled in a slow breath. His look had gone serious, but she already knew. She'd known from the way he was watching her. His thumb traced across her lower lip. The question slipped out of Isabella before she'd decided to ask it, barely a whisper. "How long?" The faintest smile touched his mouth. "The tunnel made me wonder." His thumb moved again. "Then I found the photograph in the drawer, the room off the tunnel, you and your mother on your first birthday. That made me sure." Isabella smiled, and it hurt to do it. "And you said nothing. You weren't ready to stop being Anita." His fingers traced the edge of her smile. "But if you're asking how long I've wanted you..."
His eyes didn't leave hers. "Since the cliff. Since the first second I pulled you back from that edge. You were falling and you still looked ready to fight me. I should have known right then you'd be trouble." "Why?" It was barely a sound. He kept stroking her cheek, slow. "That fire in you that won't quit. The way you turn cold and clever the second things get hard. How hard you fight, and a kind of beauty that ought to be illegal." Something moved across his face, there and gone. "You beat me, Isabella Conti. Came at me from a side I never saw. I came here for revenge. Instead, I found you." She lifted her hand and laid her fingers against his cheek. He turned his head and pressed his mouth to her palm. For days she'd held her own reins so tight, and now she felt them slip, every one of them. She wasn't going to be able to fight this. Her body knew it before her mind could build a case against it. The heat had started low and was spreading, belly to hips, and her heart was slamming, and every place near him seemed to wake before the rest of her could catch up. Eros leaned down and set a kiss at the corner of her mouth. The sound that left her, she had no time to hide. He stayed there a second, his lips barely off hers, giving her the room to turn away. She didn't. She turned into him. That was when his control broke. His mouth moved over her cheek first, then along her jaw, slow enough to make her breath catch. When his lips finally brushed hers, once, then again, she parted for him, and his mouth closed over hers, warm and deep. He kissed her, slow and heavy, and all the way present, and she gave it back with everything she had. His mouth moved to her ear, her throat, and she pulled him down against her, breathing him in, wanting to lose herself in his hands like she'd been waiting her whole life for exactly this. I should stop, she thought. She should stop. But she couldn't. She wanted him. All of him. She wanted to belong to him. Was this only some reckless pull, or had something in her known him from the first moment? She stopped trying to decide. Her body had already answered for her. Eros pushed up to sitting and pulled her with him into his lap. They were both breathing hard. I want all of you, Isabella. The words came low against her mouth. Tell me to stop, and I'll stop. She kissed him instead, again and again. The next words came rougher, like they cost him. I've never wanted anyone like this. Her legs wrapped around his waist, and she arched into him, breathing the words against his lips. Don't stop. He took her face in both hands and held it, tilted it up to his. Look me in the eyes when you say it, Isabella. Her breath was ragged. I want you, Eros. He went still. For a long moment his eyes stayed on her, his whole body holding, close enough that the air between them felt charged. Not just this. His voice had dropped to something rough and certain. Not some passing thing. I want you in my life, Isabella. Do you understand me? His thumb brushed her lower lip. You know you're going to be my wife soon, don't you? The words should have made her pull back. Instead, they moved through her like heat, and her legs tightened around him before her pride could answer. She couldn't have found words if she'd tried. Strung tight against him, she gave him the only answer she had. She answered him, with a low moan, kissing him harder, as her hips moved against his. That was when the last of his control went. His hands moved over her like he could not stop touching her, and every place he touched stole another clear thought from her mind. Her hips followed the rhythm of him, without shame now, as if her body had stopped asking permission from anything but desire. The kiss that came was deeper, hungrier, and as the last distance between them closed, she held his gaze all the way through it. Every slow movement took another piece of resistance from her, until her fingers dug into his shoulders and the cave blurred around them. When her breath broke against his mouth, he swallowed the sound like it belonged to him. And the sound that left her belonged to no role, no lie, no name he had been handed by mistake. In a cave, with a small, white beach, two people who had run out of reasons to fight it came together, and the rock gave their voices back to them, softened by the water and the stone. The boat cut through the water on the way back, and Isabella sat in the seat beside the wheel, with her head turned away from him. She kept her gaze on the sea so she wouldn't have to look at him. Her eyes kept filling anyway. Everything she'd said in that cave was still lodged behind her ribs, and she didn't know how to take any of it back, or whether she even wanted to. Eros brought the boat to a stop in the middle of the water, the engine falling into silence. She turned to him then, not sure what she'd find. He came around and knelt in front of her seat, down on the deck, so that for once he was looking up at her instead of down. His hand moved slow through her wet hair. "Do you regret it?" She pulled in a long breath and let it go, and the answer came out smaller than she meant it to. "I don't know. Right now I don't know anything." He didn't argue with that. He took her hand, turned it over, and pressed it to his chest, right over his heart, until she could feel it beating steady under her palm. "Trust me." Then he leaned up and kissed her, slow. The kind of kiss that asked for nothing back. And she felt some of the tightness in her chest let go before she could stop it. The boat reached the house. Tony was waiting up on the terrace, and the moment they climbed out, he didn't waste time. "Boss, the ship cleared Freeport this morning. New York expects it late tomorrow." Tomorrow. The word landed somewhere cold in Isabella's stomach. Whatever this was between her and Eros, it had a clock on it now, and her father was at the other end of it. She made herself look at Eros. "You have to bring Anita here. I want to see her." "Anita's coming." He held her look, and there was no give in it. "But not yet. I have to stay with the plan." She wanted to argue. She could see in his face that it wouldn't move him, and that the plan, whatever it was already in motion. So she let it go, and heard how tired her own voice sounded. "I want to be alone for a while." By afternoon she was up on the top floor of the house, in the indoor pool, standing in the shallows where the water reached her chest and the wide glass walls looked out over the sea. She'd come up here to think, but her mind kept circling the same impossible things. She didn't hear him come in. She only felt the water shift behind her, and then his arms came around her waist, drawing her back against him. His mouth brushed the side of her neck once, then stayed there, warm against her skin. "I know your name now." The words came low against her throat. "I want to know the life Vito hid under it." So she told him, not all at once, and not cleanly, but piece by piece, held against him in the quiet. "I've been in London since I was 14. After my mother died, my father sent me away to boarding school." His thumb moved slow along her collarbone, steady, and she found the rest easier than she expected. "Bella Martins. That's the name on my papers. My mother's maiden name." She felt the strangeness of it even now, saying it out loud to him. "I didn't understand it at first. It took me years to understand what he'd really done. He hid me. I never went back to New York. Nobody knew about this house, so I'd come here 2 months every summer and barely see him." He didn't say anything, just listened, his lips resting against the back of her neck like he could hear her better that way. "My mother was gone. I had no one." Something in her went quieter on it. "When Anita came to work here, she was the one person who treated me like a friend. The only thread I had left to anything that felt like family. Her father worked for mine. I've known her since I was a child." Eros smoothed a hand down her wet hair, slow. "That sounds like a very lonely life." "I have a few friends in London. The family I chose, you could call them." She tipped her head back against him. "And I'm not as buried as he thinks." His lips grazed the line of her shoulder. "What do you do there now?" "I studied social work, finished 3 years ago. My father wouldn't let me take a job." There was a dry edge to it now. "So I work anyway, quietly. He thinks I spend my days reading and lunching with harmless people." His question came softly at her ear, and somehow it pulled the truth out before she could hide it. "And instead?" "Instead, I sit across from girls who know how to disappear while everyone is looking at them." For a moment he didn't say anything. His hand went still in her hair, and when he spoke his voice had changed. "Your father hid you from the world, and you chose to spend your life finding the people the world hides." Isabella went very still against him. No one had ever said it back to her like that, had ever taken the shape of her whole life and handed it to her in a single sentence, and the truth of it went straight through her. She turned in his arms to face him and brought her hand up to the side of his face. Then his mouth was on hers, and the rest of it went quiet. A knock came at the open door. Tony stood just outside it, his gaze fixed on the far wall, anywhere but the pool. "Boss, didn't mean to interrupt. But you told me to tell you the second it happened. The papers are ready." Isabella pulled back from him, the spell breaking. "What papers?" Eros didn't take his eyes off her, the two of them dripping onto the tiles. "Anita threw every piece of ID you had into the sea the day my men stopped your car. Smart of her. It also means you can't so much as leave the country on your own name right now." He let that land. "So, a clean identity, travel papers, enough to get you out of Malta." Her chin came up. "As who?" "Isabella Conti." His thumb moved slow along her jaw, like the answer mattered more than he was letting on. "And then, when you choose it, Isabella Sorvino." "When you choose it." The words stayed with her after he'd gone. Not Sorvino, not marriage. Choose. Her father had spent her whole life making her choices for her and calling it protection. Eros had just put one back in her hands and waited. That evening, Eros said he had business and wouldn't be staying for dinner. So Isabella ate alone on the terrace, her plate mostly untouched, the dark water spread out below the rail. Tony stood a few steps away, close enough to watch her, and far enough to pretend he wasn't. "Tony?" She didn't turn around. "When is Eros coming back? Where did he go?" Tony shifted on his feet, choosing his words carefully. "I can't tell you where he is, miss." He hesitated over the name, then said it anyway. "Conti." Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. She set it down and looked at him. "So you know, too." He dipped his head, and the smile he gave her was almost gentle, the kind a man offers when there's nothing useful he's allowed to say. "Tony." She turned in her chair to face him fully. "Let me see Anita. Please. She needs to know I'm all right." He shook his head slowly. "I can't do that, Miss Conti. Miss Vella knows you're safe. That's all I'm allowed to say." Then he gave her a small nod and walked back inside, leaving her with the night and the sea. Isabella looked out at the black water and felt something harden inside her. She was tired of men building walls and calling them protection. Her father had hidden her. Eros had guarded her. Different hands, same cage. She'd spent her whole life being moved from one set of locked rooms to another by men who all swore it was for her own good. And the worst part, the part that made her angriest, was that when she thought of Eros, her heart still slammed against her ribs like it wanted out of her chest. His hands, his mouth, the way he looked at her as if she were the only thing in the room worth seeing. It ruined every clean thought she tried to have about him. Am I in love with him? The question scared her more than anything because some reckless part of her wanted the answer to be yes. She picked up the wine and drank it down in one long swallow. "Do something, Isabella. You can't be anyone's pawn, not your father's and not his." Isabella checked the time. 2:45 in the morning, and Eros still hadn't come back. From the bed, she'd been watching the speedboat down on the lower terrace, tied to the bollard, riding the black water. The door opened in the dark. She let her eyes fall shut and made her breathing slow, like a woman asleep, but she'd known him before she saw him. His scent reached her first, leather and oud and the warm night still clinging to him. She heard the soft fall of fabric beside the bed. Then the mattress dipped, and he slid in behind her where she lay, turned away from him, and wrapped an arm around her and buried his face in the back of her neck. Isabella caught the inside of her cheek between her teeth. His hand splayed low across her stomach and drew her back into him, and when her body answered it before she could stop it, his mouth moved to her ear. "You're still awake." She kept her eyes closed. "Where were you?" He pressed a kiss to her shoulder. There were things that needed handling. She turned in his arms to face him. Their eyes found each other in the low light, and he pushed a hand into her hair, slow. "What is it?" She didn't have an answer she could give him. She let her face do it instead, everything she couldn't say sitting right there for him to read. His thumb moved along her cheekbone. "I know what this is doing to you." The words came low and even. "Not tonight. Tomorrow, we sort all of it out." His name came out of her low, half a plea and half something she didn't have a word for. "Eros." He pressed his face to the side of her throat and breathed her in, and when he lifted his head, the look he gave her said it before he ever spoke. "Trust me." Her lips parted under his thumb. Before she could answer, he drew her in and kissed her, slow and deep and almost careful. That carefulness undid her more than hunger ever could have. She gave herself to the kiss, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, her body moving toward him before pride could stop it. He pulled back just enough to look at her. No war, no father, no tomorrow. Just the way he looked at her, like she was the only thing left in the world he could lose. Maybe this is the last time I'll ever be this close to him. The thought cut clean through the heat of him. She kissed him harder, done being careful. His control slipped, his hands found her waist and pulled her flush against him, and she felt all of it at once, his weight, his mouth, her own pulse loud in her ears. Closer, she thought, then closer still. The room fell away. There was only his breath and hers, ragged, tangled, the same, and in the moment they came together, a sound left her, half pleasure and half grief, and one tear slipped loose and ran down her cheek. He kissed it away, tasted the salt of it on her skin. "You're mine, Isabella." Rough against her throat, his voice barely holding, a groan tore out of him as she moved under him. "I can't be without you." His forehead dropped to hers. "Not anymore." She held on to him, as if her hands could keep the moment from ending. The sun hadn't come up yet. Isabella lay watching Eros sleep beside her, his body curled around hers even now. Like this, with his guard down, he wasn't the hard man who gave orders and bent rooms to his will. He was the one who'd held her in the dark an hour ago, the one who'd come apart in her arms. Then she eased out from under his arm, slow, and got up. She dressed without turning on a light. Barefoot, shoes in her hand, she went down the stairs without a sound. The house felt asleep, though she knew better. The men were somewhere, the cameras were somewhere. Still, the corridor outside the bedroom was empty, and the stairs were clear. Out on the terrace, the night air cool off the sea, she crouched at the mooring and worked the line free of the bollard. She'd never handled anything this fast, but she'd run her father's little Zodiac up and down the coast for years, one hand on the tiller. "I can do this," she told herself. She climbed down into the boat and felt under the console latch, and there it was, the spare key, left where one of the men had tucked it after fueling her up. She closed her hand around it and took the wheel. Up on the cliff path, two of Eros's men stood under the security light, talking, their attention on the upper road where any trouble would come from. No one was watching the water. One chance. That was all she had. She set her jaw and turned the key. The engine roared awake. Both men spun toward the sound, and she shoved the throttle forward. The boat lurched, swung wide, fought her, then caught and tore away from the rocks. She threw a look back. The men were already sprinting for the terrace, shouting. The balcony off the bedroom was still dark and empty. The words left her low, torn away by the wind, almost before she'd said them. "Goodbye, Eros Sorvino. I'll find my own way." Eros woke to the sound of an engine catching, and the bed beside him was cold. He was at the glass before the thought had a name, in time to see the speedboat pulling away from the rocks below, a small figure low behind the wheel, the wake already white and widening on the dark water. His glance cut to the empty sheets. Then he was moving, down the stairs two at a time in nothing but his boxers, the morning air hitting him cold the second he came out onto the terrace. Tony and three of the men were down at the rail, shouting after the boat, their voices torn apart by the wind. He turned when he heard Eros behind him, and there was real distress on his face. "I'm sorry, boss. I didn't think Miss Conti would actually take the boat." The words came fast, tripping over each other. The spare key was still in the console after the fuel check. "Should we put the helicopter up? We can intercept her the second she comes ashore." Eros didn't answer right away. He stood watching her pull farther out, that figure at the wheel holding her line, not once looking back. "No, Tony." His voice came out quiet, far quieter than the men expected. "Let her go." He didn't turn from the water. "Get every man we have on the far shore into position, every place she could land. Now. They watch, they don't approach. Eyes on that boat the whole way. I don't want anything happening to Isabella." Tony stared at him like he'd misheard. "Boss, the ship reaches New York tonight. Vito Conti's going to be here." He looked like he couldn't square the order with the plan. "She's our leverage, isn't she?" Eros could still catch the trace of her on his own skin, leather and oud, gone soft with the warmth of her. His hand went to his chest before he knew it was moving, flattening over the spot like he could press the feeling down. Nobody touches Isabella. There was no give in it at all. "I only want to know where she is. We're changing the plan, Tony." Tony stayed there a moment longer, something working behind his eyes, then gave it up and went to make the calls, throwing one last look back over his shoulder. Eros didn't move, his eyes on her until she was no more than a pale speck against the open sea, a thin line of foam marking where she'd gone. He shook his head slowly, and the smile that pulled at his mouth had an ache in it. "Stubborn girl. Run all you want. You're still mine." Isabella nosed the boat onto the strip of sand near the Conti house and went up the beach fast, her shoes in one hand. Nothing moved. The grounds looked deserted, the windows dark, the place holding its breath. She slipped in through the side door she'd used 1,000 times as a girl and took the stairs to her old room 2 at a time. She stripped out of the clothes she'd worn off the island and pulled on shorts and a t-shirt, something she could move in. From the bottom drawer she took the cash she kept stashed there. All the while she kept crossing to the window, scanning the drive, the gardens, the line of the sea. Eros hadn't come after her. The thought landed in 2 places at once. Part of her ached at it, part of her could finally breathe. Maybe he loves me enough to let me go. She turned the idea over, afraid to trust it. She was halfway across the room, ready to leave for good, when she heard it. The low chop of a helicopter, coming in over the water. She froze at the glass and watched it drop toward the pad, and as it touched down, she saw him through the open door. Vito Conti. For 1 second she just stood there. She'd meant to be gone. Instead, she turned and ran for the library. The blue book came off the shelf the way it always had, and the wall behind it gave, and she stepped into the dark of the tunnel and pulled it shut behind her. She was waiting in the black, her own pulse loud in her ears, listening to the front of the house come alive. Her father's voice, the heavier tread of his men, doors. She knew the route by heart. She moved along the tunnel until she reached the stretch that ran behind his study, found the loose stone with her fingers, and eased it out without a sound. The little gap looked straight in. Vito was pacing, like the room was too small to hold him. "You're certain where Sorvino is?" One of his men gave a short nod. "Camino, sir. We've pinned down the location." "That ship docks tonight." Vito stopped at the window, his back to her. "I take my daughter and my cargo back the moment it does, or I don't recover from this. You understand me. A man who can be robbed and stay robbed is finished." "What do you want us to do, sir?" The man's voice stayed careful. "Move on the place?" Vito looked out toward the sea a long moment. "Hit the house, the dock first, then the generator. I don't care if it's a drone, a boat, or a man with a bag of explosives. I want Sorvino trapped on that rock before the ship reaches New York." The man shifted. "Sir, Miss Conti's with him." Vito took out a cigarette and lit it, in no hurry at all. "Get her out if you can." The question came back, lower this time. "And if we can't?" He drew on the cigarette, and the answer came without a flicker of feeling. "Then make sure she never leaves that island as a Sorvino." In the dark, Isabella stopped breathing. There he was, the man who'd worn her mother down to nothing with years of quiet cruelty, who'd called every cage he built a kindness. Her father. His name and his standing came first. They always had. Before her mother, before her, before anyone. She had spent her whole life telling herself he was hard, but he was hers. Listening to him now, she understood the shape of it for the first time. He had never been afraid of losing her. He had been afraid of being seen losing her. One of the men stepped in close. "The car's ready, sir. It'll take us to the city apartment." Vito nodded and gathered a few things off the desk. "We don't stay here. Sorvino will know I landed within the hour." She listened to them go, the voices thinning, a door, the cars on the gravel, then nothing. Alone in the tunnel, Isabella pressed the back of her wrist to her eyes and wiped the tears away. For the first time in her life, Isabella stopped wondering whether her father loved her. He did, in the only way Vito Conti knew how to love anything. He loved owning her. Isabella ran for the water like something was chasing her. The boat had slid back off the sand and drifted out, riding low on the swell a dozen yards from shore. She didn't stop to think. She hit the water at a dead run and swam for it, dragged herself over the side and shoved the hair out of her face. She had to reach Eros. She had to warn him. Whatever her father had planned, she would not let him take Eros too. The engine bit, and the boat shot out across the open water, the bow slapping hard against the swell. Comino rose ahead of her, pale and sharp under the noon sun. For 1 second, relief hit her so hard her eyes stung. Then she saw the smoke. A dark column was climbing the side of the cliff house, twisting up into the clean sky. Her hands locked on the wheel. "No, no, no, no!" The first blast tore up from the dock. Fire ripped off the rocks bright enough to stain the water orange in broad daylight, and the sound of it reached her a heartbeat later, deep and brutal across the sea. Then the glass front of the house buckled, and a second column burst from the generator wall. The scream tore out of her before she knew it was coming. "Eros!" Her hand jerked off the throttle. The boat slewed sideways on its own wake, and she dropped to the floor of it, one hand clamped over her mouth, the other locked on the edge of the seat, like the world had tipped under her. Last night she had been in that house, in his arms. Now it was gone, and Eros with it. For a few terrible minutes she couldn't move. She stayed where she'd fallen and stared at the burning place on the cliff, at the spot where he had slept beside her hours ago, where his mouth had been on her skin, where he had told her she was his, and he couldn't be without her anymore. Then whatever she'd been holding together split open the rest of the way, and she let it. When she finally pushed herself up, her legs shook under her. The tears were still there, wet on her face. But behind them, something hotter had come back, the same fire that had been in her eyes the first time she'd ever decided to fight. She brought the boat around, away from the smoke, and pointed it back the way she'd come. "I know where you are, Father." The words came low and certain, half torn away by the wind. "I won't let you take one more thing from me." Her fingers closed hard around the wheel. "You've taken enough." The apartment sat on the top floor of a building that looked out over the marina, the kind of place no one would think to check. Her father had leased it years ago for a mistress, and it still sat in that woman's name. No one would ever guess Vito Conti was here, which was exactly why Isabella had come. The sun was going down over the water when she reached the door. 2 of her father's men stood outside it, and they straightened when they saw her, hands drifting toward their jackets. She didn't slow down. "Open it. I'm Isabella Conti." They looked at each other, thrown, and that half-second of hesitation was all she needed. She pushed past them and walked in. Vito stood by the windows with a phone in one hand and a glass of whiskey in the other, half turned away from the door. "No body? What do you mean, no body?" His voice was tight. "Then find him." The words hit her like ice water. No body. Eros was alive. He hadn't died in that house. Somewhere, somehow, he had walked out of it. The relief came so fast it almost buckled her knees, and right behind it came the question that mattered now. Where was he? Vito turned and saw her. For 1 second, real surprise crossed his face. "I'll call you back." He ended the call and lowered the phone. "Isabella." He set the glass down and came toward her, his arms beginning to open. "Thank God. You're all right. Did you get away from him?" His tone warmed, smooth and certain. "Come here. Come to your father." She didn't move. Her eyes stayed level on his. "You had the house hit." Vito stopped where he was. Something shifted in his face, just slightly.
but she knew him too well to miss it. "You don't know what you're saying." She cut across him. "Did you even stop to wonder whether I was inside it?" His hands opened, like the answer should have been plain. "My men had orders to get you out first." Isabella shook her head, and the laugh that came out of her had no humor in it. "And Anita? Did anyone even ask if she was alive?" She took a step closer. "4 days I was gone. Did you lose 1 minute of sleep over me, or only over what Sorvino might have taken that belonged to you?" Vito's jaw tightened, and his words came out clipped. "Do not raise your voice to me." And there he was. Not the relieved father with his arms held open. The man underneath, the one who had always expected her to fold, his tone leveled out, cold and even. "I am your father. I have protected you your whole life. You seem to have forgotten that." "Protected me from what?" Her voice shook, but her feet stayed where they were. "From your own world. Is that why I grew up in a cage, Papa? Because of what you are?" Vito's eyes moved over her differently now. They went to the door, to the guards behind her, then came back to her face, and his next words came low. "How did you get away from him?" The suspicion in him sharpened to a point. "If you're standing here, where is Eros Sorvino?" Isabella looked at him, and for a moment she couldn't believe there had ever been a girl who waited for this man to love her the right way. "I heard you." The name she'd called him all her life wouldn't come. "In the study, at the house. I was behind the wall the whole time." Vito went still. She gave his own words back to him, low and exact. "Get her out if you can, and if you can't, make sure she never leaves that island as a Sorvino." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then it was Vito who looked away first, and when he answered there was no apology in it, not even a flicker. "I said what had to be said. Sentiment is a luxury men like me don't get to keep." He turned and called toward the hall. "Bring the cars around, we're leaving." Then to her, almost mild again, "I have you back. Now I get my cargo back too." She held her ground. "I'm not going anywhere with you." His face hardened, and when he spoke, the warmth was gone for good. "You don't get a choice. We'll make new arrangements. Somewhere no one can ever use you against me again." The fear was still there, but underneath it she had gone steady. "Enough, Papa. I'm done hiding. I'm done being moved. I'm not coming with you." Vito's hand closed around her wrist, hard. "Then I'll take you out of here myself. We're going." One of the guards started forward, then froze. The hallway had gone strangely quiet. A voice came from the doorway, low and cold. "Take your hands off her, Vito." Eros came through the door with 6 men behind him, their guns already up and trained on her father's. His eyes found Isabella first, and held. Eros. His name came out of her low and unsteady, every knot in her chest loosening at once. His face stayed hard. He didn't look away from Vito. "Let go of her arm. You've done enough to her for 1 lifetime." Vito's grip loosened, and his color drained a shade. "Sorvino, how did you find this place? How did you get past my men?" The corner of Eros's mouth moved, not quite a smile. "I let her go. I didn't leave her unprotected." Vito's eyes cut to Isabella. Eros's tone cooled. "A man who spends his life shooting people in the back should expect it to come back around." His tone cooled. "And trying to bury me with that house? Sloppy. I stopped expecting men like you to honor a deal a long time ago." Vito recovered fast, the way he always did. "Kill me and all you're left with is your revenge. That ship docks in New York and you get nothing. I sold the cargo to the Russians this morning." Eros looked almost bored. "Of course you did. You just missed one thing. The Mironov brothers have been mine for years. That ship was mine before it ever left the Bahamas." A laugh broke out of Vito, sharp and disbelieving. "You paid the Mironovs for your own cargo." Eros's expression didn't change. "No, you only thought you did. The money was bait. The moment you took it, you opened the door. Check it if you want." Vito's face went grey. He fumbled the phone up, thumb working the screen, and whatever he saw there drained the last of the blood out of him. Eros lifted a shoulder. "I only took back what was mine.
I'm not the thief here." He tipped his head toward the hall and Tony stepped in with Anita beside him. She was pale and shaken, but she was whole. Isabella crossed the room and pulled her in, and for a moment she just held on. Vito's voice cracked. "You set me up. All of it was a trap." Eros's words came low and even. "You set yourself up. You robbed me. You put a knife in my back. You're a cheat and a coward, Vito Conti. And you already know what that costs." "Eros, no." Isabella was moving before she finished the word. Don't kill him." The muscle in his jaw ticked. But when he looked at her, some of the hardness left his eyes. "You know I won't do anything that hurts you, Isabella." Then his gaze cut back to Vito, cold again. "But if he ever comes for you, I won't be merciful twice. And the price he really owes, that one I haven't collected yet." He held out his hand to her. "Come with me. My jet leaves in 45 minutes. I can give you a life where you never have to hide again, where you use your own name, where you work wherever you want." Isabella's throat tightened. "And if I don't come with you? What happens then, Eros?" His hand lowered, slow. He held her eyes across the room. "Then I'll respect it." The words cost him. "And this will be goodbye." Isabella's eyes had filled, but her chin stayed up. She looked at neither of them. Not at Vito, not at Eros. And when she spoke, her voice came steady. "I don't need any man to build my life for me." Her gaze moved to her father first. "Not Vito Conti." Then to Eros. "And not Eros Sorvino either. Nobody in this room is here to save me." She turned full on her father. "I'm done hiding because of your dirty work. Do you hear me? You're not going to do to me what you did to my mother." Vito's mouth curved, unbothered. "This is the family you were born into, Isabella, like it or not. I can choose my own family, though." She held his eyes. "Can't I?" "Isabella." Eros said her name low, something pulling under it. She looked at him, and the words came quiet and certain. "I'm choosing myself, Eros." Behind her, Vito let out a low laugh. The muscle in Eros's jaw tightened. Tony shifted at his shoulder. "Let's just take her and go, boss." Eros lifted a hand without looking at him. "No one touches Isabella." Then he held her eyes one last time, and the smile that came was a pained thing. "Stubborn girl." Eros turned for the door, Tony and his men falling in around him, and the room felt colder the second his back was to her. Before he reached the hall, he looked at Vito one last time, and every trace of the softness he'd shown her was gone from him. "If a hair on her head is ever harmed, I won't kill you fast, Vito. I'll make it last." Then he walked out. Her father waited until the last of them was out of sight before he turned to her, his face already settled into something almost warm. "You're not going with him, Isabella." He came a step closer. "After everything he's taken from me, don't hand him one more thing." A warmth crept into his expression that turned her stomach. "I'm proud of you, you know. You brought a man like that to his knees. You're your father's daughter, after all." She went very still. Then she looked at him. And for the first time in her life, she felt no fear at all. "You don't understand me at all, Papa." Her words came quiet and even. "I didn't stay because you told me to. I stayed because I wasn't going to break you in front of your own men." Her voice didn't waver. "You're still my father." Vito started to cut in. "Isabella, I'm nothing like you." Her words stayed low and steady. "You don't even know how to love. Not my mother, not me. You just watched a man let you live because he loves me, and called it weakness." Her chin lifted. "He knows you'll come for him. He chose to spare you anyway, because hurting you would hurt me. Maybe at the cost of his own life one day." Her eyes held his.
What have you ever given up for me? Vito's mouth opened, but for once nothing came. The answer was written in the empty space where it should have been. Isabella turned away from him and didn't look back. Anita caught her hand at the door, her eyes still red. Isabella, she searched her face. Do you love him? Isabella's throat tightened, but the answer was the easiest thing she'd said all day. Yes, I love him. A smile broke through before she could stop it. I think I finally get what it means to love someone, to put them before yourself. She leaned in and kissed Anita's cheek. Thank you. For all of it. Anita squeezed her hand and didn't let go. Isabella's voice dropped just for her. You know where to find me. She went down through the building and out into the street, where the light had gone gold and low over the water. The cars were pulling out. Eros had nearly reached the last of them. She called after him before he could get in, sharp enough to carry. Eros Sorvino! He stopped. For a moment he didn't move at all, and when he turned, the corner of his mouth had already lifted. She crossed the distance to him with steady steps and stopped close enough to feel the warmth coming off him. Isabella Conti, he said, like her name was something he'd been holding. She looked up at him, the words barely above a whisper. What happens now? His knuckles grazed her cheek, and the hardness she'd seen all night was gone from his face. What do you want to happen? She let herself breathe him in. I miss New York. Then we're going to New York. Something eased in him as the words left him. Her mouth curved, then wavered. I don't have anything to bring with me. Only myself. His arm came around her waist and drew her in, slow and sure, until almost no space was left between them. That's more than I could ever want. Her eyes filled, and this time she let them. His thumb came up to the side of her face and caught the first tear before it could fall. No more cages, he murmured. She leaned into his palm. No more cages. Then his mouth found hers. Behind them the sea kept breaking against the old stone harbour, the cars idling at the curb, the city moving on without them. And for a few seconds she heard none of it, only the water and the sound of his breathing. When he finally drew back, he didn't pull her toward the car. He opened the door and waited. Isabella looked once at the building behind her. Somewhere above them, her father was still standing in the ruins of everything he'd thought he owned. Then she looked at Eros. He held his hand out to her, open, and left it that way. He didn't close it around hers, not this time. She placed her hand in his, and when she stepped into the car, it wasn't because she had been taken, or hidden, or traded, or won. It was because she had chosen. The door shut softly behind her, and the car pulled away from the harbour, toward the airport, toward New York. For the first time in her life, Isabella Conti belonged to no one but herself. And because she did, she could choose him. Thank you for staying with Isabella and Eros all the way to the end. Now I have to ask, would you have chosen Eros, the dangerous man who came to tear your family apart, and ended up loving you for exactly who you are, not your name? Yes or no, tell me in the comments. I promise you I read every single one. If this story moved something in you, like the video, subscribe to Stories That See You and turn on notifications so the next one finds you. And here's the truth. Your comments are what keep me going. A single like makes my whole day. As long as you keep loving these stories, I'll keep writing them, and I'll keep them free for you, always. Take care of yourself, and never let anyone keep you in a cage and call it love.